Chapter 1803. Even with the convenience of the origin energy and the elimination of the influence of the chaos superorder on the environment of the void of order, more people could enter the primeval realm. However, after 5 eras, the number of primeval realm cultivators was still not particularly high in the entire void frontline. Those who entered the primeval realm early were constantly using their own methods to break through. They were less restricted by the environment of the void compared to others and could go further. However, those who were stuck below the primeval realm could only slowly accumulate, tormenting divinity carriers, and wait for the day of the ultimate leap. Therefore, there was a phenomenon. The difference between each batch of primeval realm cultivators was, well, it was quite big. The earliest primeval realm cultivator was Hui, and the next was Jing Yuanji. Hui was still in the mid-level primeval realm, slightly lower than Brother Lei and Sui Feng. The latter took a long time to eliminate the influence of the void law from the previous era. It took a very long time to reduce the influence to a level that was enough for them to continue moving forward. It was like taking off the shackles on one's body bit by bit. Every time a layer of shackles was removed, the speed of progress would be a little faster. Back to the topic. Hui, Jing Yuanji, Lord Green, and 30% of the soldiers of the Divine Realm were all in the mid-level primeval realm. To be more specific, Hui, Jing Yuanji, and the other leaders were around the 5th heaven, which was quite close to the 6th heaven. The other mid-level primeval realm cultivators seemed to have just entered the 4th heaven. Putting all these people aside, the next batch of primeval realm cultivators were all in the early level, which accounted for 80% of the total number of primeval gods. It was not a lapse in generation, but a serious time constraint. This was the most troublesome drawback of the divinity carriers. It took a very long time, just like using time to grind down the primeval realm barrier in front of one's eyes. As a result, the gap between the first batch of primeval realm cultivators and the next batch of primeval realm cultivators was quite big. Beyond the primeval realm, one would also encounter restrictions when breaking through. Everyone had to wait for a very long time. Perhaps it was because one had to go against the rules of the void to forcefully break through. The duration of the restrictions was more than 5 or 6 times longer than what Brother Lei and the others had experienced before. If the source law could really prevent them from coming into contact with the weak environment of the void, and instead come into contact with the source law that was stronger and more special, the duration of the seal would be shortened. Secondly, there would be no restriction on entering the primeval realm. They would no longer have to focus on divinity carriers, and they could use other methods. The earlier they entered the primeval realm, the earlier they could escape the shackles of the void law. To put it bluntly, it was a race against time. Every bit of time counted. But can it really reach this level? We calmed down after a minute of excitement. It sounded like a wonderful thing, but it sounded unlikely, so he doubted it. There's no guarantee that it can really be achieved, but we could try. After all, it's a direction. As I said, this feeling comes from the first light. The rules, order, and chaos of the first light all came from the chaos era. If the replicated weakened source law is indeed related to the chaos era and the first primeval realms environment, then I speculate that it should be possible to reach this level. If it happens, Yin Nuoxing shrugged. It would be a great thing for the world of order, right? If it really happens, I can also enter the higher primeval realm within the time limit you set, although it's just a beginner. Hui shook his body and nodded. He imagined the scene and could not help but feel a little excited. If it really works, then what should I do? This question came back. So what should I do? Yin Nuoxing had no idea. First, mess around. You just said it once. I thought you were joking. No one has done it before, and probably no one will do it in the future. Even if there's a direction, we have to start. Yin Nuoxing patted Blue Phoenix's head and sighed. If we can't even start, we can't go on. And there's no example that can be used as a reference, and there's no way to understand the principle. So what can we do other than mess around? Of course, I don't mean completely messing around. First, treat it as the primeval energy and the primeval law. Since it's the law of the 8 primeval realms, let's first mix them together. As for how to mix them together, we can only try it one by one. If this method really works, it will definitely succeed, but it will take some time. Yes, it will take some time. If it's just 5 by 5, like Maple said, it's fine. It's not like we can't afford to wait for 5 billion years. I'm just afraid that this thing will encounter some unknown trouble. The Void likes to do this kind of thing. It's always causing trouble for us, and it doesn't know how to throw a few stones at the underworld. Jing Yuanji, who had returned and heard the conversation between the two of them, stood and listened for a while. Then she asked tentatively, "Won't this affect the underworld? If the primeval law allows the underworld to break free from the restriction, well, that's a problem." Yin Nuoxing only thought for a moment before throwing the problem aside. We just have to fix the boundary delineated by the primeval law in the node cities of the Void frontline. That could be done with the Sanctum of Origins. Right now, the Sanctum of Origins is still helping to open the domain. We patted him on the shoulder and reminded him, "The domain you used to suppress the power of chaos 5 years ago has been in effect on the Void frontline for 5 years. Throwing another one in now means opening 2 special domains against order and rules at the same time and dividing them into different areas. Is that okay?" Yin Nuoxing paused for a moment. He might have forgotten about the domain left behind by the primeval god of origins after he perfected it and threw it on the Void frontline. That domain was also spread through the Sanctum of Origins and was mainly used to suppress the power of chaos and order. There were 2 other smaller arrangements that also worked against the larger environment of the Order Void. If that domain was removed, the pressure on the frontline warriors would probably skyrocket. It was not to the extent that they could not handle it, but they would have to transfer some of the people who were assigned to other missions back to the frontline to guard the frontline. That's not worth the loss. It's not feasible. Other domains were fine, since they were similar to magic circles. Overlapping would at most stack their effects and functions. On the other hand, domains that interfered with or adjusted the environment of the Void did not overlap, and to have 2 domains stacked together. There's no telling what would happen, and the Void might collapse at any moment. For example, if they defined a silver needle as air, the next second, the silver needle would turn into air and disappear. Then, if they defined a silver needle that turned into air as a pool of liquid, the silver needle would melt into a pool of liquid metal. Then, the previous definition would disappear and be revoked. It would not conflict with each other. If both were used together, they would define an object as air and liquid at the same time. Well, with their realm, the Void would collapse. If they interfered with and changed the nature of the Void too much, it would be like fighting with the Void. Since the Void itself was not as strong as them, it would collapse when they fought. That's what they meant, but interfering with the Void was definitely much more difficult than interfering with the Silver Needle. Only one domain was allowed to interfere with and change the environment of the Void. If 2 domains smashed down at the same time, the rules and order of the domain would be stronger. If the strength was the same, they didn't know. They had never done such a thing before. If the Void didn't collapse, then the 2 domains would collapse together. Therefore, they had to prevent the underworld from coming into contact with this domain, but they also had to let the domain unfold normally in the entire front line of the Void. They also had to maintain the suppression of the abyssal death mist. It's down. Hui was also startled when he saw smoke coming out of Feng's head in the blink of an eye. Siyu and Qing Huang hurriedly took out their fans and fanned his head. This problem is indeed a little tricky. Hui crossed his arms and looked gloomy. As he thought about it, he couldn't help but look at Jing Yuanji. The girl was half an inheritor. Although she didn't have the origin energy, she still used that thing from the origin god to break through to the next realm. Perhaps Jing Yuanji naturally knew what it meant after being stung for a long time. She shook her head helplessly. "I'm sorry, Master Hui. I can't think of any ideas. We can only make concessions and compromises to interfere with the origin energy. If we want to coexist, unfortunately, we may not be able to meet all the requirements." Huey's face twisted. On the other side, smoke was still coming out of Feng's head. Feng Qing Wang had to transform into her ice phoenix form to cool him down. About 5 minutes later, when everyone's faces were twisted in confusion, Yin Nuoxing suddenly raised her head. The smoke on her head suddenly disappeared. We can only make concessions. What kind of concessions? Seeing that Feng seemed to have an idea, we stopped tormenting his brain and quickly asked, let's set the domain in the frontline world, the vassal world of the void frontline. If that's the case, we can only adjust the personnel. Yin Nuashing sighed. We understood as well. The domain would be set in the vassal world of the void frontline. It would not be spread through the origin sanctum, but would be set up in each node region. Since it was useless to keep the suppression effect on the death mist in the frontline world, they might as well just let it go. The removal of the mark of chaos from the tide of chaos should also be over, and there was no need to worry about any other changes. The initial domain was no longer useful in the frontline world, and it was naturally time to change to another domain. Make some adjustments. Let the origin sanctum leave the node cities, and keep the suppression domain in the void outside the node cities. The new domain would include the node cities and the frontline world of each node. That's all I have in mind for now. If that's the case, the only thing that needs to be adjusted is the distribution of personnel. We lay back. Try to get those who are not in the sealing period and those who are about to indigo there earlier. I think I'm thinking too fast. We haven't even started. There's no harm in thinking about it earlier. Yin Nuashing shrugged. But it's time to start. Anyway, let's give it a try first. Arranging the world core that Jing Yuanji handed over in front of his eyes, Yin Nuashing released the void precepts of the 8 primordial realms, which were all extracted from the center of the void. Now, they were injected into the same world core in order. Seeing that he began to act, the little angel hurriedly pulled Frost and the little purple soul out of the spiritual world. She also sealed the spiritual world that she had been operating for many years to prevent it from being destroyed. It looked like she was fleeing for her life. Hui kept muttering as he watched him do it. Explode, 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 explode. Yin Nuashing, I've just started. Don't do it like this, okay? Although the road at the beginning was indeed difficult, it was not to the extent that it would start to explode in the first minute, right? He was in the state of perception and energy, and he did not sense anything wrong at the moment. How could he fail just like that? Boom. Hui looked at the energy fireworks that were blooming in front of him. They were not huge, but were exceptionally gorgeous. He could not help but sigh. Look, it's going to explode, right? Everyone, they felt that it was because of his nagging. When someone comes out later, he will definitely vent his anger on you. Why don't you run away before he realizes what happened? Something suddenly tore a big hole in the energy fireworks. The sound of wind breaking mixed with the residual energy explosion rang in everyone's ears. Everyone was stunned. When they turned their heads, they saw a black shadow flash past them and hit Hui on the head. Hui staggered and rolled into the sea of energy. A huge wave mercilessly rushed over and swept him 1,000 meters away. Fengqing Wang and the rest looked at the strange wave and the Guardian, who was clearly a mid-level premier but could not avoid it. They had every reason to believe that the observer was taking revenge on them. The little angel picked up the heart of the world that had fallen on the platform. This heart of the world had been destroyed. The energy explosion inside made it blossom like a flower. The outer shell and the core were twisted and turned outwards. The residual energy in the center was still bursting with sparks. The leaked energy that was not caught in the explosion was still calm and mixed. It seems that I can't sense its nature. I can't even tell which primordial realm it belongs to. Siyu curiously stretched out her slender finger and poked at this piece of art that had turned into trash. The latter trembled slightly and began to disintegrate. Its physical body seemed to be cast by fluorescent light and separated bit by bit. Whether it was the chaotic part or the energy part, it was slowly disintegrating into pure energy and the power of rules. The original information and aura of rules have been washed away. Generally speaking, even the energy explosion of origin energy would not be able to wash away damaged objects so cleanly. Jing Yuanji took it and looked at it for a while before it completely dissipated. When a structure of rules completely disintegrated, she looked at Lord Feng and asked, Lord Feng, do you have any clues? The result of the conflict between the auras of the different primordial realms. Yun Nuashing walked over with another heart of the world in her right hand. As she walked, she explained, because of the shadow's information, the similar parts between the 8 primordial realms and the 7 primordial realms will be judged as one and put together in an attempt to overlap. You can think of them as two iron rods that are bent at 90 degrees. They cannot be back to back and can only meet force with force. A third of them will quickly stick together as soon as they get close to each other. When they collide with each other forcefully, they will smash each other into pieces. They just try to mix the rules of the 7 primordial realms with the rules of the 8 primordial realms, and something happened. I don't know if it's because of Huey's nagging. Yin Nuashing spread her hands and sighed. Everyone nodded, indicating that it was very likely. The rules of the 8 primordial realms, 8 sets of rules. Even if we have them, it's not that simple. There shouldn't be a way to use the most direct method to put them together. We need to change our way of thinking and use a special method to restore them. Perhaps we still need the guidance of the original light. Yuanji, help me get a part of the heart of the world. I have to be tortured here for a while. You don't have to wait for me here. Go to the front line and see if there's anything you need help with. While you're at it, throw out that ornament floating in the sea of energy. Everyone turned to look at the human-shaped ornament who was still struggling in the waves of the sea of energy. Looking at each other in dismay, they shrugged their shoulders, and when they retreated, they brought him out as well. Hey, it's rare to see Maple show such a conflicted expression. Looks like he's going to be tormented for a long time this time. Outside the observer space, we looked at the space entrance that was slowly closing and couldn't help but say, C's pretty face twitched. I don't know why, but when I heard this, I felt that little star's conflicted time seemed to have been extended by a few hundred times. The girls nodded in unison, making Hui feel awkward. However, since he himself had said 5 fives at the beginning, at least a budget of 500 million years would be used to study the heart of the world. In the near future, Maple probably wouldn't be able to get any special results. They also couldn't help Maple in any way. The guy who used the origin energy and the first light had his own unique perspective of looking at the world, understanding and analyzing the world. His perspective was not the same as theirs. If they used their own methods to help, unless it happened to coincide with a conventional domain and could be solved using conventional methods, it would only be more of a hindrance. And to solve something that felt strange from the beginning, it was obvious that more than half of it couldn't be solved using conventional methods. Jing Yuanji, every time you go to deliver the goods, secretly check on that guy's condition. Hui blocked the soul transmission and whispered to the others. Don't appear in front of him during normal times. Wait for Jing Yuanji to tell you that something might be wrong with him before you go and take a look. What's wrong? Why do you sound so serious? See, you sensitively sensed that something was not right, and even her expression changed. Hui scratched his head and breathed a long sigh. No, it's nothing now. I'm just worried. After all, he didn't recover even after going out for a stroll, and I'm worried that he won't be able to hold on if this goes on, or something. Well, I'm just worried. It seems that things are fine now, and I'm just reminding you. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked towards a void. As time approaches the final time he and we set, I'm worried that the idiot who said 5 fives would become impatient. In fact, there are times when Maple is more impatient than I am. Well, now is one of those times. Leaving the observer space, Hui poked his head out to the front line. Brother Lei, Jing Yun, and the others were not guarding the front line. They were probably in seclusion or making breakthroughs in the Temple of Origins. Even so, the pressure on the front line was relatively small, to the extent that it could be considered small. Although there were still countless primeval spawns in sight, their numbers did not change, so it was considered normal for the time being. It was just that there were some cores missing in this normal state. Some cores who should have used the abyssal death mist spawns as cannon fodder to charge the void blockade by themselves. He was talking about the underworld and primeval fledglings. The former aside, the fledglings were all gone. The fledglings' numbers were also sharply reduced, and most of them were gathered at the rear, shooting arrows from behind while commanding the abyssal death mist spawns and constructs to charge and break through enemy lines. It was as if they had to protect the more important components at the rear to reduce losses. He did not believe that the underworld did not know that there were a lot of primeval information on the Void front line. Since they did not attack them out of anger, there should be some special move. For example, that time when the high-level primeval joined forces, they were planning to crush them in the Void in one go. In front of the Temple of Origins, he flipped through the records of the dozen or so days they were not there. Since the Void front line had more primeval combatants, the casualty rate on the front line had been gradually decreasing. Apart from a few eras where they were wiped out, the casualty rate was very low. In these dozen or so days, there was not a single casualty. Well, there was one. There was only one casualty record in the entire Void front line. He had to hurry and see which idiot had sent him to the spiritual temple at this time. I'm sorry, everyone. I play myself to death. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm a pig. I can't even beat a few hundred fledglings. Jing Yun's message. Hui was speechless. Well, this guy probably rushed to the abyssal death miscrack to show off his strength again. He was surrounded by a few hundred fledglings and trillions of manifestations and constructs, and was blasted back to the spiritual temple after a wave of concentrated fire. This guy has been very arrogant since he returned to the primeval stage. He rushes to the depths every day. Does he think he's a high-level primeval? We did not know whether to laugh or cry as he put down the crystal ball that recorded the information. Time. If only everything continues to develop normally. Well, there shouldn't be any problems in a short time. We looked up at the Void, muttered to himself, and then sighed. Lord Hui, there's something unusual to report. I Ching's voice rang out before he could finish his sigh, causing his face to be filled with melancholy. If there's nothing, it's better to shut up. The probability of this stupid mouth causing trouble seems to be getting higher and higher. Glancing at the Void front line, which he reckoned would be the same with or without him, Hui walked into the Temple of Origins and used the temple's energy to strengthen his soul communication with I Ching. There was some interference on his side, and he did not know where he was. Communication is normal. I'm in the Temple of Origins. Speak, what's the matter? We've discovered a world group. I Ching's voice slowly sounded after a few seconds of hesitation. It's not easy to judge the situation in front of us. All right. I'll go over. Since I have nothing to do now, send me the Void coordinates. Hui quickly tidied up his outfit. Before he stepped out of the Temple of Origins, he received the Void coordinates that I Ching threw over, and his entire body trembled. Damn it, where did you run off to? Chapter 1804. The coordinates were clear, undisturbed, and unaffected by some unknown energy, and very clearly told him where I Ching and the others were. The lower plane, the far frontier. Ever since the abyssal death shroud sealed off their visualization of the Void, they had not heard any information or intelligence from the lower plane. More than 80% of the middle plane's territory had been lost, and there was no telling if the underworld had done anything shameful in the middle and lower planes. Spawning sanctums, and spawning. That was pretty much it. It was actually hard to tell how large the Void region sealed off by the underworld was. Either way, every Void region they knew of had been sealed off, and there was no way out. Even if new Void regions were discovered later, or new worlds in the middle and upper planes that had yet to be discovered, they were all surrounded by the abyssal death shroud. While they observed and expanded the Void sealing zone, they also found traces of the abyssal death shroud, but probably because they were at the edge of vision, those places were not involved in the battle. Either way, it was clear that the underworld who was executing the blockade clearly controlled more Void regions than they did, and basically all of them were sealed off. Under such circumstances, I Ching had thrown a set of coordinates from the far frontier of the lower plane, and it was coordinates that bypassed the blockade and could be directly teleported. Could he have found a place that was not sealed off by the abyssal death shroud? You're in the lower plane? How did you sneak to the lower plane? Hui Man asked impatiently as he prepared for the Void teleportation. You didn't just barge through the abyssal death shroud, did you? Lord Hui, you've overestimated me. I Ching laughed bitterly. We followed the tracks all the way here, but because we were too focused and did not sense the presence of the abyssal death shroud, we did not pay special attention to where we were. When we realized it, we were already in the lower plane, and we were all shocked. You're also a talent. That's fine. Stand still, I'll go over. With the detailed guidance of the void coordinates, there was no need for him to explore and transit in the void. It only took him 1 or 2 minutes to reach his destination. When Hui Man was imagining what he would see in his mind, the teleportation had quietly ended. Because he had crossed 2 planes at once, the difference in energy density made him immediately realize where he was. Other than that, there was no trace of the abyssal death mist in this place. The void was so clean that it made him want to shout. If he hadn't seen I Ching and the others appear in front of him along with the void, he would have really shouted. Lord Hui, I Ching and the others bowed respectfully, moving to the side so that Sir Hui could clearly see the scene in front of him. That's the world group in front. Hui Man slightly turned his gaze. When the teleportation ended, he noticed that there was a bright light in front of him. But it was not normal. Something born naturally in the void would have such a large light. Generally speaking, only a large world group would have such a large light. According to the report, a world group had been found. But when he took a look, he suddenly took a deep breath. The scene in front of him could only be described as hideous and disgusting. He took a closer look, and after peeling off the large mass of colorful yarn, he could barely see the situation clearly. The void surrounding the world group had a huge crack that spanned millions of miles. That was the scar of the void being torn apart. The cracks crisscrossed with each other, as if they had turned into solid fragments that pierced into each other's cracks, cutting the sea of time that bloomed in the void crack. The golden sea gushed out like blood from the wound, and then crashed into the 2 crisscrossing void cracks along with the waves. The void had already mixed with the void, like 2 hemp ropes twisted into 1 rope. Gradually, it was impossible to tell who was who. Other than the sea of time, even the primordial realms barrier and the space barrier were cut apart by the huge, solid void crack. The void in front of them was completely bruised, and the bruises were solidified and solidified. The energy of the sea of time, the energy leaking from the primordial realms barrier, and the power of the space barrier had all turned into the blood of the void, gushing out from tens of thousands of big cracks like waterfalls. They hung in the void and fell towards the world group from countless directions. All kinds of energies were also attracted by the messy environment here, and all of them crashed into this pot of void soup. The scene was so tragic that it was like dismembered animal carcasses were thrown into the pot without any cleaning, mixed with internal organs, flesh, bones, and blood. It was a bloody mess. Oh no, I'm going to vomit. This world group did not encounter the most tragic tragedy in the void, but it definitely encountered the most disgusting thing in the void. If it was supplemented with the aura of the collision between order and chaos, and scattered evenly in this place, anyone who came to look at it would gag. Like a hanging river, spit it out. Oh my God, which great artist turned a perfectly good world group into this kind of void art? Look at this distorted appearance, this damned appearance, this psycho. He was so frightened that his head tilted back, and his palms subconsciously covered his eyes. The degree of distortion and ferocity of his whole face was comparable to that of the world group in front of him. This thing was like this when you came here? Are you sure you didn't kill it? I Ching shook his head helplessly. Lord Hui, when we found it, it was indeed like this. It has not changed in the 16 minutes since we found it and you came here. Huey's cheeks twitched violently, and he turned his head to look at the miserable state of the void. The guts were cut open, the bile and blood were all over the ground, and even the intestines were leaking out. This, forget it, I'm going to throw up everything I ate in the 3-elemental realm a few days ago. He did not know what the void had encountered to become like this. Going through a mountain of swords and a sea of fire was probably not as tragic as this. Even if it had rolled around in the divine destruction storm, it would not have been so miserable. Did you find something that could cause this? He could not help but want to take another look, and turned away with a green face. A tragedy? This void has been in a state of lockdown ever since we came here. We have searched around a few times, but found nothing. I Ching shook his head. By the way, you haven't told me how you came to the lower realm. How did you bypass the abyssal death mist? That a very long. I'll try to keep it simple. Master Hui raised his hand, and I Ching knew what he was going to say. He coughed dryly and said, About a year ago, when I went out to search for the world of order. At that time, I was at the bottom of the void in the upper realm. The level of the void was shallower than here. There, I found a destroyed planet. It had the residual scent of the lower realm, but it did not have the scent of the abyssal death mist. The time of its existence was also very strange. When I first looked at it, the time of its destruction showed that it had been destroyed for more than 10 years. After a while, it looked like it had been destroyed just a year or two ago. After a while, its time of destruction showed that it was in the future, as if it had been shoved back by a weak power of time, so it was not disturbed, I Ching said as he slapped his forehead. I'm off topic. Anyway, we showed it 3 different times of destruction and analyzed the possible reasons. We also tried to trace its traces in the void. We followed it all the way from the upper realm to the middle realm. Before we crossed the abyssal death mist, we saw a half-destroyed world of light. Just like the destroyed planet we first found, it had a chaotic flow of time, and it was difficult to determine what time it belonged to. The world of light was severely damaged by the erosion of the void, but the strange thing was it should have been destroyed as a whole. After all, there was a hole in its world barrier, and it could not stop the erosion of the void. Maybe the heart of the world is still there? We tried to explain. No, we specially went in to look around. It's an empty shell. There's nothing inside. The erosion of a void is also very slow. We speculate that it should be affected by the strange flow of time. Its performance in the sea of time should be in a severed state, so it's difficult for the void to have any effect on it. Well, skipping this part, you studied the world of light for a while, continued to trace its traces, and finally found this place. I Ching nodded with a complicated expression. Although there were more than 30 traces, we checked them one by one until we found the last trace, which made me feel a little resentful. It took us a whole year. This child is a little unlucky. So, the whole world group also has the chaotic flow of time that you mentioned. We turned his head again to look at the tragic scene, which was as tragic as the collision of 2 world groups in the void. His cheeks twitched a few times. No, I don't think we can find anything in this scene. Just as you said, I Ching sighed. We can't find anything. There are too many traces here. Even if we use the power of the heavenly God of the beginning to separate them one by one, there seems to be a delicate balance between them. The whole world group is in 3 states at the same time: energy leakage, void erosion, and energy injection. The energy injection happens to be at the same speed as the energy leakage and void erosion. We dare not break the balance. We looked at the tragic scene with his arms crossed and pondered. I think you should find a technician. Brother Ching and Sister Jing said that Master Phone is in seclusion. They asked me not to disturb him, so I can only find you. I Ching scratched his head and said, Why don't I call Phone over? Anyway, let's seal this part of the void first. Seal the part of the void passage that bypasses the abyssal death fog inch by inch. It might be useful in the future. I Ching, let's go take a closer look at this tragic scene. Hui and I Ching wandered around the periphery of the world group, trying to touch something while not affecting the energy balance here. The void scar here won't heal. The sea of time, the space barrier, and the primordial realms barrier will always be open. It looks like someone opened their stomach and dug out their intestines and brains. We couldn't help but say this. Beside him, I Ching's face immediately turned green. He opened his mouth and made a retching gesture. Thanks to you, the way I look at the void now is not normal. Hui laughed dryly. The 2 of them stood in front of the largest void scar. This void scar should be the size of solar system. It pierced through the side of the world group from a very distant place, piercing through 13 void scars along the way. It also pierced through the sea of time, the primordial realms barrier, and the space barrier. It was lucky that this place did not have any spatial disorder. It was randomly connected to any reality world. Maybe it wasn't right. Or maybe it was already connected to the real world, but it was connected to the real world of the world group. The world group, which was already empty, naturally wouldn't panic because of some cracks in the real world. From another perspective, if the largest crack pierced through the world group from top to bottom, the tremendous energy surging out of it formed 4 or 5 waterfalls of different sizes, like a blood-stained scythe. Only the edge of the scythe could be seen. It fell from the sky and slashed at the center of an enormous city. The blood flowing out of the scythe turned into a rain of blood in the city below, making countless ordinary people think that it was the end of the world. Look at this perspective. Doesn't it look like the blade of a sickle pierced through the world group? Hui pointed forward and gestured at the void scar around. I Ching tilted his head and looked around thoughtfully. After a while, he landed beside Lord Hui and said, "If that's the case, the other void scars, the gushing sea of time, the power of the primordial realm, and the power of space, when combined, are like a huge seal that has nailed the entire world group in the void. It seems to explain why the inflow of energy and the outflow of energy in this place are in balance." Hui was a little excited. His eyes flashed with golden light as he scanned the entire world group. It took him about half a minute to come back to his senses. There is no trace of a seal. Either it's not a seal, or it's a special seal of someone else's world, such as a ritual. We can't get the result before we know it. Huh? We seem to have found something. He suddenly flew forward without saying goodbye. I Ching quickly stopped observing and followed him. The two approached the largest void scar in the void. When they got closer, they could really feel the size of the void scar. It was huge, and it seemed that he could not help but reach out and touch it from afar. Hey, it's a solid body. Lord Hui, the void scar has solidified. Hui heard I Ching and tried to touch it with his hand. His fingers seemed to touch a solidified crystal. There was nothing special about it. They were immersed in the void and did not have much of a sense of touch. After all, they were almost immune to the erosion of the void. The void scar torn in the void has solidified. It pierced through a dozen layers of the void. No, this aura, it should be more than 30 layers of the void. Hui frowned and looked distressed. The void was divided into shallow layers and deep layers. To make it easier to understand the concept of tearing the void scar in the void, they would generally treat the void as a stack of tens of millions of white papers. They would dig a hole in the layer of paper on the surface and see that there was still a piece of paper behind the hole. They would then dig through the paper below until they dug through a dozen or 20 pieces of paper. The hole would then become a three-dimensional scar. Now, assuming that a piece of paper was a layer of the void, this scar was a dagger. Using the dagger to stab into the pile of paper, the wound caused by the void scar in front of them would be the void scar in front of them. Hui reached out and touched the sea of time that slid down the scar. He looked at the golden liquid flowing on his hand for a while and let it flow down the scar again. It's fresh, not solidified. The sea of time is also not solidified. Even if this void region is broken, it still has substantial energy exchange with various layers. It is even drifting in the void. There will be world light clusters that break away from the hole. That's why you can capture the world light clusters that drift out and the planets that pop out from the world light clusters. Then, Hui lost his patience. I can't take it anymore. I can't handle this at all. I need a call for reinforcements. Hui roared at the top of his lungs. I Ching smiled bitterly and covered his face. He thought to himself, Lord Feng, I really didn't go to disturb you. It was Lord Hui who disturbed you. Feng, you're King Noisy. The first thing that came out of the soul communication was Lord Hui's hoarse roar, followed by a loud explosion. Then came Lord Feng's cursing voice. Seeing that Lord Feng might have accidentally blown something up and was about to go berserk, Lord Hui immediately switched the soul perspective to the front. Don't panic. We found something that you might be interested in. Yin Nuoxing, who was about to charge over with the nether void sword, frowned. She slowly put down the sword and looked at Hui's soul perspective. What is this? What did you do to the world group? Why, the pressure of fighting the abyssal death mist is so great that you have to vent outside. How did the world group provoke you? No, it's... Hui smiled bitterly and quickly explained the matter clearly. In the end, he added the reason why he had to call for a certain wise and mighty Lord Observer. In short, I can't handle this thing. Yin Nuashing took a deep breath and almost threw the broken world core at Huey's head across the void. You, phew. Taking a deep breath, Yin Nuashing put on a calm face. You're a mid-tier premier. There shouldn't be anything in the void that can confuse you except for the origin, right? The pile of junk in front of you obviously doesn't have any trace of the origin energy and the origin law. Why do you still need? I don't have a brain. Yin Nuashing. Damn it, how many times has this guy said this reason? Yin Nuashing sighed and threw the world core into the sea of energy. Sitting upright, she observed the world group destruction and chaos before her eyes for the guardian who usually did not have a brain. Cross it out. Usually did not have a brain. Hui and I Ching Jing waited for her to look at it. They also changed their perspective so that she could look at the world group from all sides. After about a minute, she finally finished looking at something and blinked her eyes. For now, I can see that this world group has a stay time of 2 eras. Yin Nuashing frowned. The time has been stopped. No, it's not stopped. It's... Yin Nuashing lowered her head and pulled her long hair. After a while, she said, no, just treat it as a stop. It's just that the internal time has been stopped. The sea of time is still surging forward, but this world group has stayed in the same place for 2 eras. Do you understand? Hui let out a long oh and said, if this condition is met, it means that in this world group, there isn't even a single origin. That's right. Yin Nuashing nodded slowly. It was normal for there to be no origin in the lower plane. Regardless of how the stay of 2 eras happened, whether it was a void disaster or who did it, the world group in front of them had stayed in the same place and experienced 2 eras of its own instead of 2 eras of the De Yuan realm. This situation could not be wrong. 2 eras. If it was done by someone, many things would have to be sacrificed in order to buy such a long time. I Ching Jing frowned. There are many things in the void, especially in our current situation. There are many things in the void that can be used to offset the price. Waste energy, waste world light, waste world group, and destroyed void regions can all be used to specify. The fewer high-level life forms there are, the lower the price. We don't know how many things they sacrifice for 2 eras, but we can only see that they used this method to buy themselves 2 eras. Hui scratched his head and said, then why was the world group destroyed? Because the time was up. Yin Nuashing said matter-of-factly. They forcefully seized the time of 2 eras. They're like static stones in the sea of time. However, the stones in the river will also change after being washed by time, but they will not be damaged in the present because they are solidified. However, when the time of 2 eras came to an end, Huey's face twitched. Damn it. The impact of 2 eras was directly used on the world group, on the void regions. Is this why it was destroyed? On the surface, that should be the case. Completely destroyed. The timeline, void, order, and rules are all destroyed. The reason why it still remains here is probably because, some sort of anomaly in the void caused it to become. Yin Nuashing pondered for a moment before speaking. A specimen. The time difference between the 2 eras was too long. From the moment they seized it, the world group was destined to be destroyed in the blink of an eye. However, no one expected that it would not return to the void, but instead become a living specimen that was frozen in place. It could even communicate with the outside world a little, and it was this remnant of communication that finally allowed I Ching and the others to discover the remains hidden in the far reaches of the lower planes. As for the void anomaly, a little thought would make it obvious. The void anomaly was from the lower realm. The answer was self-explanatory. It was a sign of void anomaly. Chapter 1805. The premonition of the void turbulence probably only worked for a short while and did not cause it to be annihilated in the void. Therefore, it left behind such a bloody scene. It was also possible that time had returned to normal, and when it was about to completely collapse, the impact of the premonition of the void turbulence made the whole process strange. In the end, it left behind such a tragic scene. Disasters related to time would occasionally happen in the void. To the time of the Great Yuan realm, it might only be a second, a day or two, or a month. However, in the area that was locked by time, it might have been tens of thousands of years, millions of years, or even trillions of years. This was a void calamity that would happen when the order and rules of the void were wrong. Generally speaking, as long as there was a high enough life form, such a calamity would not happen. Moreover, the probability of a void calamity occurring was extremely low. The probability of a void calamity occurring after a zero followed by a string of zeros would only occur when the environment of the void was unstable. At that time, the probability was quite high. In other words, it was not long after the last void turbulence. He snapped his fingers and then calculated the time in his mind. The void annihilation triggered by the god of origin was at the end of the 39th era and the beginning of the 40th era. The end of the recovery should be at the end of the 42nd era. That is to say, this world group, wait a minute, you're talking about the center of the void. The end of the 42nd era in the center of the void is the end of the recovery. However, it is different for other places. Yin Nuoshing reminded him in time. Hui exclaimed and calculated for a while. Then, if we convert it to the lower plane's distant border should be, this is a blurry period of time, and during this period of time, the conquest of the underworld should have already begun. Your world was not affected by the abyssal death mist, right? Then it might not have been included in the underworld's blockade from the very beginning. Excluding all external factors, the lower plane's far border should be at the end of the 47th to 49th era. Yin Nuoshing said, but a void calamity that caused time to stagnate for 2 whole eras still feels a little inconceivable. Hui stroked his chin and pondered. Can you see the specific time of its destruction? Yin Nuoshing paused for a moment before changing the topic. It's difficult. There are too many traces. It's already very difficult to tell how long it has been stuck in the same place. If you want to see more, Yin Nuoshing paused for a moment before changing the topic. Try to go in and see if there are any traces left behind. If there's anything left behind, you might be able to deduce when it was frozen. In any case, it's either the 47th era, the 48th era, or the 49th era. When its stagnant state ends, it will be the time of its destruction. All right, let's skip this topic. Hui crossed his arms and muttered to himself as he speculated. If we exclude the influence of the void calamity and assume that it was man-made, there's no need to assume that. If you go in and take a look around, there's a high chance that there are traces of life left behind by the void disaster. If there are no traces of life at all, it's more or less assumed that it was set up by someone, and the moment it was set up, the entire world group had been given up by default. In the end, we still have to go in. Hui jumped when he heard this. I deliberately changed the topic because I didn't want to go in. Nonsense. If you don't go in, who knows what's going on? Yin Nuoshing rolled her eyes at him and waved her hand to urge him. Don't waste time. Go in and take a look. I still have the source law to deal with here. I'm deliberately stalling for time to solve the riddle for a brainless fellow like you. You better thank me with gratitude, you bastard. That's a very strange way to put it. Hui and I Ching didn't stay there for long before they plunged into the world group's territory. This place was far away from the abyssal death mist's encirclement. They did not have any scruples and did not affect the balance of the world group as much as possible. Since they were just looking for traces of life, it did not take long for them to finish. There's no trace at all. Hui waved his hands and put them in his pockets. He had a weird expression on his face. Clean. Completely clean. There is not a single trace of life in the tens of thousands of world-like clusters. The entire world group has been immersed in the free void energy. Perhaps it has been destroyed for too long. Plus, it has been a long time since people left. Therefore, the life aura has been wiped out by the void energy. But it makes sense. Even if the void disaster broke out in the 49th era at the latest, it would have been 2 eras inside the world group. In the outside world, the Great Yuan realm's time would have passed at most 2,000 years, or even shorter. It's been destroyed for at least 6 eras. Yin Nuoshing nodded in response. I can't find any traces, although it's normal. Well, actually I was hoping to find something. such as residual traces, weak energy exchanges, or traces left by something that has been here. Hui blinked his eyes quickly and showed a strange expression of reminiscence. About half a minute later, he suddenly rushed out without saying anything. Yin Nuoxing and I Ching were both stunned. The two of them hurriedly followed him and circled around the edge of the world group. When he was circling around, he kept looking left and right, as if he was looking for something. Yin Nuoxing and I Ching looked at each other. They did not know what Hui was doing all of a sudden. Seeing that Hui did not say anything, they did not say anything for the time being. Found it. About 5 minutes later, Hui jumped up on the spot and pointed to the front with excitement and joy. I just glanced around and saw it. After looking for a long time, I thought I saw it wrongly, but it turned out to be the back. At this time, they were at the back of the scythe's blade. Hui reached out and pointed to a rather large void scar. It was an ordinary sawtooth scar, 1/3 the size of the scythe. However, a part of the scythe's body pierced into the largest scar and was hidden in it. It was another scar. At this time, it did not seem too special. However, what made Hui excited was not the scar itself, but a building that appeared on it. It was an ordinary house, built on a crack as a foundation. It looked quite out of place. It did not appear in the world of light, nor was it in a fragmented state. Instead, it was a small house built on a crack. There was not much that stood out about it. There were only 1 or 2 simple domains that maintained it. It would not be swallowed by the void. The style could not be distinguished. Compared to the hundreds of styles they saw on the void front line, there seemed to be 100 or 200 that were quite similar, but not exactly the same. The houses used by the human race in the void were almost the same. At most, they were a little strange. However, no matter how strange it would not be as strange as a snail's shell. Hui and I Ching landed in front of the door of the small house. When they got closer, they could see clearly that the small house was only 3 or 4 meters high and about 10 meters wide. It looked like it had 2 rooms and a living room. They did not know who set it up here. No matter how they looked at it, it looked very deliberate. Was it left behind by survivors? I Ching walked around the house and whispered, "Why did you say that the people in these tens of thousands of world of light were killed the moment you opened your mouth?" Hui rolled his eyes and patted him on the head. Then, he turned to look at Feng. "A house left behind by fugitives? So that we can come back and take a look?" Yin Nuoxing said, "Both of you are saying the same thing." The interior of the house was as barren as its exterior. There was nothing special about it. There was only a stool and a bed in the interior. It looked no different from an empty shell. The 3 of them walked around the interior of the house and came out. No, that's not the point. Hui immediately waved his hand after they came out. "What I want to say is that this should be a trace left behind by someone. Can we follow this trace to find out where the people might be? If they are still in the void and not dead." Yin Nuoxing looked at the void and looked around. A light flashed in her eyes. "Found it. Follow the distant border and keep going in the direction of the side." However, the energy trace is quite vague. This house should have been left here for a long time. Maybe it is really like what you said. The survivors came back to see their destroyed home or successfully escaped from here and one day came back to reminisce about the world they lost, something like that. You think they are still alive? It is quite possible. Yin Nuoxing nodded and turned to look at the collapsed world group. Personally, I feel that they should have known about this long ago. Regardless of whether it was man-made or a void disaster, they knew. That is why the entire world group is empty. There are signs that it was carefully cleaned up before they left. Perhaps they left the world group when the time was almost up. They might have even witnessed their home being destroyed by the void in time. The footprints left here are engraved in the history of the entire world. The living continue to move forward, burying the drips of the past here. All right, let's not talk about this for now. Go take a look. Call me when you find something alive or something that can point you in the right direction. But if you dare to break in again, I'll throw you into the God-destroying storm." Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and snorted. Then, she turned and her soul image disappeared, leaving Hui and I Ching scratching their heads with a dry smile. Just as they were about to move forward, Yin Nuoxing suddenly appeared again. Ah, wait a minute. Bring the entire world group back to the void. This is a rare material. I should be able to use it. Hui, Feng, you're getting more and more out of hand. Just a second ago, you said that it was a mark of someone else's world. In other words, it was a ruin or ancestral grave. Now, you want to dig up the entire void. Leaving it here is just keeping it. It is useless except as a specimen. Yin Nuoshing rolled his eyes, waved his hand, and slowly disappeared. The others don't have any other use other than looking at them. It's good that you're giving them to me to make the best use of them. As for the historical remains or not, just leave a place for them in the Institute of History. Currently, it's just a blank place. As for whether there will be anything, it depends on whether you can dig out any history. Hui rolled his eyes. This time, Feng really went back first. Hui and I Ching looked at each other and shrugged helplessly. The great observer would occasionally come up with situations that left them helpless. In the big picture, there was no big problem. The specimen was just a specimen and could not produce any value. It was better to move it away and let the great observer study it. Perhaps she could find something new. That being said, it was a little forced when they thought that someone might occasionally come here to take a look. The world orbs, world group, and world cores that they had found in the void were all completely useless. They were floating around in the void and were confirmed to be ownerless. It was not the same as the world group that had turned into a ruin and seemed to be admired by people. All right, let's not dwell on it. Let's pluck it out of the void. Hui patted I Ching's shoulder. The two of them worked together to suppress the entire void territory. Without much effort, they removed the void territory and sealed it into a crystal ball. For safety reasons, they even sealed the crystal ball with divine patterns to maintain its internal balance. This was to prevent them from using it to set off fireworks in the future. After settling the world group, the two followed the path that Feng pointed out and headed deep into the void. Along the way, they left the presence of order and markings, including the void, into their realm of order. They were far away from the center of the storm in the middle and upper planes, so there was no need to use the void seal to seal this place. It was just a subconscious action. They had gotten used to searching for undiscovered worlds of order in the void. As for the use of marking this place as their realm of order, it could probably be used as a retreat route. All right, it was just a thought. They would not retreat, nor could they retreat. They left behind order orbs along the way, so that those who caught up would strengthen this realm of order. With the orbs as the center, they slowly spread order energy into the surrounding void. They expanded the realm of order and occupied the void. They also had to strengthen the defenses. This was the far end of the lower planes. It was hard to guarantee that there would not be small-scale void turbulence. They had to strengthen the area occupied by the realm of order to prevent the void turbulence from washing away all the energy they left behind. At the same time, they also left some energy runes to monitor the situation in the void and try to collect information from the void turbulence. They headed deep into the void. They walked and stopped for about 6 or 7 days. Their speed was not fast. They had mainly been setting up the realm of order these days. So far, they had not seen anything. It's so clean that it's like someone is purposely cleaning this path. I Ching scanned the void around them and said, because their level is lower than ours, purposely cleaning up the weak traces left behind makes the void seem unnatural. Originally, such small traces would be easily swallowed up by the void. Well, because this is the far end of the lower planes, the activity of the void is a little low. So it did not manage to swallow such traces in time. Moreover, these traces should have been left behind in a relatively short period of time. Hui yawned. But if we still can't find anything, I'm going back to hold the fort. I Ching, you guys can continue to search ahead. I Ching smiled bitterly. Lord Huey's patience had been exhausted. In fact, it had been exhausted long ago. During this period, he had chatted with Lord Feng a few times. His exploration of the source law did not seem to be going too smoothly. Lord Feng was depressed and had asked Lord Hui to find something new to give him some inspiration. Lord Hui had persisted in his search, although he did not say that they would definitely find something if they continued to search along the path. That was not the case either. The moment the two eras were restored, the vibrating timeline twisted the entire void region into something like a rotten orange that had been pinched a few times. The fact that the living beings inside were still alive should be a rather novel thing. It would be even better if he could find the group of people who were still alive and learn something from them. Ah, Lord Hui, there's a distortion point in the void. I Ching's sharp eyes noticed that there was an abnormal distortion in the void far away. He took a step forward and fixed the black vortex that was about 10 meters wide in the void. He then used the void energy and the power of order to test it for a while before he continued. The other end of the distortion point might still be in the void, but I can't tell what's the situation on the other end. Hui stepped forward and waved his hand above the distortion point. I can't feel the traces left behind by something teleporting. In the timeline, I Ching nodded. It's the same as what we found. It's hard to tell when it was opened. Perhaps it's the people we're looking for. That's interesting. Hui stretched his back and rubbed his palms. He waved his hand and said, "Prepare the realm of order and hide well. We'll teleport directly." I Ching nodded and left a beacon of order on the spot. He waved his hand and tore open the distortion point in the void. A bright white light burst out from the center of the black vortex. The reverse space and void energy poured into it and barely opened a reverse teleportation channel. He guided the channel to expand and swallow the group. Teleporting through the void distortion point was actually more uncomfortable than teleporting through the void. The latter had a rough void coordinate to guide them, and they knew where they were going. The void distortion point was actually, a solidified vortex left behind by a sunken ship. That's right. And they stood on the surface of the sea and had no way of knowing how deep the vortex led to the bottom of the sea. That was roughly what they meant in their minds. As for the reality, the void distortion point was a trace left behind by a teleportation from an unknown location. Where to go depended on where the distortion point originally led to. It was a bit of a gamble. What's more, the void distortion point was usually a small tail that would only appear in low-level void teleportation. It was easy to be followed if one did not pay attention to it. As the void jump was even more uncontrollable than the blurry teleportation, the group felt a momentary trance. After a while, they calmed down and the scene before them slowly took shape. It was dark. Well, it looked like they were still in the void. But there was something in front of them that obviously did not exist in the void. A floating garbage dump. He did not mean to say that, but it really looked like they had crashed into a garbage dump. There should be a large ruin in front of them, a ruin made of large stone fragments. There were large and small round and square platforms, round stone pillars, metal pillars, semicircular roofs, arc-shaped energy crystal walls, pyramid-like covers, and there seemed to be spiral stairs. They did not know what it was, but in short, there were two things that looked like circles. There were a lot of them, densely filling the void in front of them. They suddenly appeared in the center of this garbage dump, surrounded by hundreds of millions of fragments. Yes, hundreds of millions of fragments. Otherwise, he would not have called it a garbage dump. Even the asteroid belt did not have such an outrageous number of fragments. Lord Hui, what kind of place have we crashed into? I Ching smiled bitterly and could not bear to look at it. Don't ask me if you don't know. Hui subconsciously opened the energy barrier. The weak energy disturbance caused by their teleportation made the fragments move. Tens of thousands of fragments that were close to them knocked on their energy barrier, bounced off, and collided with other fragments. The fragments that flew out hit more fragments, and then hit more fragments. The whole garbage dump suddenly became lively. Before there was a riot, Hui slapped the void, and all the fragments that were given power dissipated and became a pure garbage dump that was still in place. These fragments are protected by weak energy of order. They will not be swallowed by the void for a while. I Ching picked up a fragment and examined it for a while. Then, he looked at the situation in the void and said, "It's not a sealed void. They must have crossed over to another void region. There's no communication with the void frontline." Hui scratched his head and said, "My intuition tells me that we may have run into a strange place." I Ching and the others trembled, and their faces turned green. Everyone knew that when Lord Hui said this, usually something would happen. This was triggered, and the magnitude of the event was up to fate. If they went out with Lord Feng, they would know without a doubt that there would be trouble, and the level of the event would be as high as it could be. Well, if they went out with Lord Hui, it would not be so easy to scare them to death. I feel it, the breath of life. Hui tilted his head and looked into the distance. His gaze passed through the ruins and looked outside. Then, his face trembled. There is also something not so good. I Ching and the others turned their gazes and saw the scene in the distance after crossing a considerable distance in the void. They instantly gritted their teeth, and their faces became ferocious. It was a battlefield, a place that they were very familiar with. Moreover, their souls would be stirred as soon as they saw it, and they would subconsciously go berserk, the scene of the great battle between order and chaos. A group of humans dressed in various styles of clothing held sabers, spears, swords, halberds, hatchets, hooks, and tridents. They seemed to be able to increase their power of order when they worked together. They seemed to be a group of beings that had not even reached the origin realm. They were not on the same level as the battlefield they had to deal with. However, in the battlefield that belonged to both order and chaos, the side of chaos was a large group of dark clouds that would never change. Countless humanoid manifestations walked out of the clouds like beans being spat out. They all wore heavy armor and held huge axes and machetes. They looked very heavy. This scene of constantly sending out soldiers was very irritating even after a few eras. There was a small distance in the void, and the breath of the abyssal death mist did not permeate. Wait, that is not the abyssal death mist. Huey's eyes were wide open. He subconsciously repeated, that is not the abyssal death mist. I Ching and the others rubbed their eyes and frowned. The dark breath was indeed the breath of chaos, but did not have the crazy red hue of the abyssal death mist. It was still the breath of chaos, but it was on the weaker side. Visitors from the chaotic void? We shivered violently. It is not the abyssal death mist. It is also the breath of chaos. That kind of humanoid form. It is a freaking soldier of chaos. I Ching shivered. Sorry, he was wrong. It turned out that going out with Lord Hui was not as safe as he thought. He should have thought of it when Lord Hui said that. Damn it. Don't tell me another chaotic concept body will appear later. Wouldn't it be better to call Sir Feng over right now? Chapter 1806. The distant border of the lower plains seemed to be in a void region that had never been discovered before. As if it had been agreed upon, the forces of order and chaos did not stop fighting even in a region that was close to emptiness. Perhaps it should be thought of the other way around. Perhaps it was because it was the distant border of the lower plains and was not particularly far away from the chaotic void, so it was only natural that there should be a battle between order and chaos here. It seemed to be an unquestionable understanding, but when there was nothing going on, this border was actually quite peaceful. In the distant void, the densely packed warriors of order were unleashing all their power to their heart's content. Although judging from their senses, they were only a group of order life forms that had not reached the realm of reciprocity. Their fighting style was not far off from the warriors at the front line of the void. The energy that filled the void could only be used to attack the enemy with the assistance of the domain of order and various energy domains. It was a grand scene. They seemed to be fighting with their lives on the line, but it could not hide the fact that they were at a disadvantage. In the void, if they could not break free from the influence of the void and directly use their energy to fight against the forces of chaos, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. Their power would leave the domain of order and leave the energy domain, and a portion of it would be devoured and disturbed by the void. Even if it was just a portion, it was enough to make them suffer. After all, their enemies, the soldiers of chaos, were not affected by the void, even if they were at the same level as them. Hui and the others had always been thinking of ways to weaken the forces of chaos and strengthen the forces of order to fight against them. Today, they finally saw what it would be like when the forces of order fought against the soldiers of chaos when they were weakened. Using the scene before them as an example and projecting it to the front line of the void, if this was what they were facing, the front line of the void would probably have collapsed long ago. The humanoid soldiers of chaos, upon closer inspection, were indeed quite different from the abyssal death mist spawns that they were fighting against. The abyssal death mist spawns were basically a bunch of mixed things. They came in all shapes and sizes. The soldiers of chaos were basically humanoid in armor and wielding sharp blades. It was just that there might be a difference in size. But why are the soldiers of chaos here so weak? After recovering from his shock, I Ching calmed down and looked at the situation in the distance with a frown. In his impression, the chaos soldiers that the two masters had seen were not so weak. This was just a group of chaos soldiers that were comparable to the heavenly gods. They were probably not even cannon fodder. The situation of the chaos soldiers is mostly related to the chaos concept body behind them. Perhaps the chaos concept body itself is quite weak. He was a little anxious as he rubbed his hands. The chaos concept bodies should have been sealed by the heavenly gods of origin. Everything that appears in the void of order is basically a projection or shadow related to them. They only control a relatively small part of their own power. We have seen two chaos concept bodies. One is a shadow, and the other is a doppelganger that is projected in the present world using some method. Looking at it now, it may be comparable to a high-level yuan sure. As for this one, we glanced at it and was a little puzzled. Based on their understanding of the chaos concept bodies, it was that anything related to them would leave a lot of gray colors wherever they were placed. Every minute and every second, they would want to turn the void of order into the shape of chaos. They had extremely powerful destructive power, and no one knew how much damage they would cause to order. They would easily tear the starry sky and the light of the world. If they made a bigger mess, most of the void would be buried with them. The chaos soldiers that they saw in the three-element realm a while ago were under the protection and suppression of the heavenly gods of origin. So it was a different story. But this one, could there be a relatively weak version of the chaos concept bodies? But they had never heard of the heavenly gods of origin being so weak that there was a heavenly god among them. This is the fourth. The fifth trace related to the chaos concept bodies. Hui recorded the situation in front of him. The chaos aura that he sensed from the chaos soldiers was different from the previous four. Was it the fifth chaos concept body? How many of them were there? Could it be that there were 149 of them, like the heavenly gods of origin? Hui was about to call out to someone in the observer space, but he shut up as soon as he opened his mouth. After a moment of silence, he shook his head. Get ready to go and support them. They are obviously no match for the chaos soldiers. Even if they don't know why the chaos soldiers are so weak, they're not something that beings of order of the same level can casually fight against. Although they are experienced, their combat power is not enough. As Hui waved his hand to give the order, I Ching and the others who had been waiting by the side immediately rubbed their palms together and subconsciously took out their energy towers. Then they were all stunned. I Ching's eyes widened. No, we don't need energy towers here, do we? Those are chaos soldiers, you know? Although they are only heavenly gods, don't underestimate them. No, the main thing is that we are using energy towers. In this state, a torrent of energy will vaporize that group of people, right? I think so. I forgot that I am already yuan sure. The group of people looked at each other. After a moment, they put away their energy towers and continued to rub their palms together, ready to charge into the battlefield. Hui slapped himself in the face. A group of yuan-sure heavenly gods had even taken out their energy towers to fight against heavenly gods. If he did not know better, he would have thought that they were preparing to attack more than a dozen abyssal death fog rifts. Yep, this was a habit from several eras. As expected, there weren't many normal people in the front lines of the void right now. Even if it was a small-scale battle, they would subconsciously go all out. This was because they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to kill off that small group of order life forms. Looking at the group of people rushing out, we were suddenly a little worried about that group of beings of order. Would they be swept into the storm of yuan sure and killed directly? No, I can't be at ease. I should go over and support them with the energy barrier. We thought as he caught up with I Ching and the others. The group of people arrived at the other party's battlefield in less than half a second. Hui waved his hand and held up the order barrier, using divine energy to sweep towards that group of beings of order. I Ching and the others burst out with all their strength, unleashing an unparalleled and vast energy attack towards the Chaos Soldiers. The whole process took less than half a second. They cooperated very well. Then, whether it was Huey's energy that was trying to save people or I Ching's energy that was destroying order, all of them missed. Everyone looked at their own energy passing through like shadows in the water. Both sides were shocked. Those energy torrents did not touch anything and just rushed into the depths of the void, leaving behind a huge energy wave before slowly dissipating. The energy of order and chaos was still clashing in the void. The beings of order were struggling to maintain the order realm and fought with the chaos soldiers who rushed into the realm. Occasionally, there would be warriors of order who were surrounded by hundreds of chaos soldiers. Their order realm would be destroyed, and they would be thrown into the void like garbage, using the power of the void to bury them. The chaos soldiers would also be defeated by the powerful order power, and the dark energy would constantly explode and scatter. Everything was happening around them. Those beings of order and chaos soldiers were like shadows. They could not see them at all. They could not touch them at all. They would even drill through their bodies. They could clearly feel the energy touch, but there was no feeling of physical collision. It was as if to both sides of the battle, they, as a group of outsiders, could only watch from the sidelines. However, they could clearly feel the movements of the battle. It was as if they were there. What was as if? This was definitely as if they were there. They were definitely standing on a battlefield. The disgusting stench left behind by the clash between order and chaos was something that they could not be more familiar with. This was definitely a battlefield. Furthermore, they could clearly feel the residual energy waves left behind by the explosion of energy. This was definitely not some shadow, mirror image, or illusion. Lord Hui, what's going on? The strange situation forced I Ching and the others to retreat. They all returned to Lord Huey's side. When they turned their heads and saw Lord Huey's puzzled face, they could not help but ask, "If you want to ask me this, I can only answer you with 3 words." Hui helplessly wiped the sweat off his forehead. He had never seen such a battle. How would he know what was going on? If it was an illusion, there were many explanations. However, they were clearly on the battlefield. They could feel the energy waves and the explosion of the chaos energy around them. Yet, they were completely unaffected. With the precondition that they were all in the primeval tier, they could directly eliminate a lot of so-called external influences. In the current world of order, there should not be anything that could directly affect them unless it was the origin. If it's not the influence of order, he narrowed his eyes as he looked at the clouds of chaos that were getting closer and closer. Then it must be the influence of chaos. This is indeed the battlefield of order where the chaos energy is the main guiding force. To put it more simply, the thing that could affect them might be the concept of chaos that they thought was a weak model. However, from the facts in front of them, it could not possibly be weak. Although I don't know what's going on, let's use all kinds of methods to try. Hui waved his hand. I Ching and the others nodded. All of them spread out in the battlefield and used their own methods to try to shake the strange battlefield. The rules, order, time, space that was unlikely to work but still had to be tried. The impact of the primeval tier's energy, increasing the power, continuing to increase the power, the energy tower-focused fire, and the accumulation of solar system-sized energy cluster directly pressed directly on the faces of the chaos. 5 minutes later, Hui and the others who had retreated a distance looked at the billions of fireworks in the void. They looked at each other for a while. Hui prepared himself mentally and let the mighty energy waves dissipate. Then he saw that the people on both sides were still passionately fighting in the void. For a moment, everyone was silent. Hey, there's no other way. As expected, when it comes to the chaos concept body, we can only let Maple do it. Let's not be an egg that hits a stone. I Ching and the others nodded. They had already tried all the simple methods they could think of, but they still couldn't do anything about that place. It seemed like this wasn't a problem that could be solved by brute force. Hui grimaced at the void in front of him. His spirit carefully touched Maple's soul seed. Maple found the chaos concept body. Boom. Hui. Why? Why did it explode again? This had nothing to do with him, right? This time, he did not make a fuss. Instead, he spoke in a very normal and soft voice. In the observer space, Yun Nuoxing waved her hand to disperse the lingering energy clouds in front of her. She sighed a little worriedly and slowly said, "Go in peace. I will write a thick stroke on the death record for you. We're not dead yet. We just ran into them and did not fight. Don't subconsciously think that we've started a war and took the time to leave you a last word or something before we die." Hui immediately jumped up and said before Maple could say anything, "We've run into chaos soldiers of the chaos concept body. If I'm not mistaken, this should be the 5th trace of the chaos concept body that we've found. Also, the situation in front of us is a little, I don't know how to put it." After listening to Hui, Yin Nuoxing looked at the situation in the soul perspective. She slowly stood up and pondered. There was no spatial division in the void. If there was a similar situation, it would be the division of void levels. I Ching and the other's attack of order destruction worked on all void levels. Even such an attack could not touch those shadows. Moreover, the battlefield was dominated by chaos energy. Although the specific situation was hard to say, she had a general idea. Maybe it's a domain. Domain. Hui shook his head. We've tried to use the primeval domain to collide, but there was no reaction. By the way, we've tried simpler methods, but none worked. No, it's not that kind of domain. It's a type of order domain, and it should be a pure chaos domain with countless order and rules. Let's put it this way. Although I've never used the destruction God's destruction domain in front of you, it's about the same level. Since it was created by the chaos concept body, it should be about the same level as the primeval God's domain. Then, we scratched his head hard. Then we're even more at a loss. Why didn't he come over? Yin Nuoxing was silent. He lowered his head and looked at the world core on the ground. He took a deep breath and said, "To be honest, I don't really want to go. I think I can get some clues." Huey's face was expressionless. "I remember you said in a short time last time. That time, it was short by 70 million years. Yin Nuoxing, I don't care. You're the one who told us to find this place. You told us to find something strange and special. Now that we've found it, we found a big problem. You have to come over and solve it. So we'll wait. When 70 million years have passed, even their ashes will be scattered in the void. Don't think that these puny heavenly gods are the same as you, who can withstand 5 eras, you bastard." Yin Nuoxing threw away the world core in her hand and let out a long sigh. She then called out to her little angel and the others who were sitting beside her. "I'm going out. Do you guys want to come over?" Little angel and Frost jumped into her spiritual world without saying a word. Fengqing Wang and Si thought for a while and nodded. They had adjusted the observer space in the past few days. There was no need for them to keep an eye on this place. This time, there was no need for them to keep an eye on it. It was fine even if they weren't here. It would be great if they could go over and help. When she received the coordinates from Hui, Yin Nuoxing was stunned for a moment. She counted carefully. 1, 2, 3, 12, 13. A total of 14 void jumps. The location is still in the lower realm. But where did you guys go? Just. Hui smiled bitterly and shook his head. Anyway, we're in the lower realm. Come over quickly. Yin Nuoxing nodded and said something to Jing Yuanji. She then brought Siyu and Fengqing Wang into the void crack that had just opened. The feeling of being teleported came and went. The three of them opened their eyes at the same time. It had been a long time since they felt the presence of the lower realm. They had been trapped in the cage for many years. Although they didn't come here often before they were trapped, they couldn't help but sigh. You've really come to a place that isn't too good. The scene in front of them was enough to express everything. However, Yin Nuoxing's attention was focused on the other side first. In the direction he was looking at, a place very far away, but also very close at the same time. That was the domain of the chaotic void. Hui shrugged his shoulders. For the time being, I've already prepared an escape route. Are they the life forms you guys found that are related to the world light that you mentioned a few days ago? We arrived here, after following the direction you gave us. I think that's the case. The underworld has almost wiped out all of the lower planes that we've discovered. It's unlikely that we'll be able to discover two groups of life forms related to the lower planes that haven't been killed yet. The origin energy began to emerge from Yun Nuoxing's body and formed a circle of energy about 10 feet away from his body. Yun Nuoxing slowly walked forward and reached out his hand to press on the void in front of him. His palm, which was surrounded by the origin energy, suddenly came into contact with a hard barrier after reaching out for some distance. He turned around and nodded to everyone. Such a defense against the origin energy. It is indeed the domain of chaos, as I thought. We came forward and looked at it curiously. There was a faint presence of order and chaos at the place where Maple's palm came into contact with the void. We also reached out his hand, but he didn't touch anything. He could not help but laugh dryly. Well, this domain depends on the person. Can you break it? I'm trying. This is also the first time I've encountered a domain of chaos that is related to the concept body of chaos. Although I already knew a lot when those damn things were nagging at me. Yin Nuoxing sighed with a depressed look. Hui laughed dryly. At this moment, Maple's way of addressing the heavenly gods of origin had changed. It had become something like damn things. Who knew what that meant? Speaking of which, why did the heavenly gods of origin keep nagging at him? Yin Nuoxing tried to increase the surge of the origin energy and continued to increase it bit by bit. It will probably take a few minutes. Wait a moment. A few minutes, Hui muttered in his heart. The shadow that the concept body of chaos left in their hearts was actually quite huge. Usually, whenever they encountered something related to the concept body of chaos, he actually planned to move the entire front line of the void, ready to be thunderous at any time. He would either crush them to death in the void or push himself into the cycle of reincarnation. Anyway, it was quite a dilemma just thinking about it. Even if he had reached the middle level of Yuanshi, he still felt that there was a big gap between him and those weird things that were born in the origin period of the Deyuan realm. Therefore, when he heard Maple say that he might be able to destroy his domain in a few minutes, he inexplicably felt an inexplicable feeling. He did not know if it was joy or regret. It would be great if Maple could reach Yuanshi. He did not know how many times that thought had crossed his mind. A few minutes. Hui sighed again after a few minutes. The group had all retreated hundreds of thousands of miles away. They watched as Maple's azure wings expanded to tens of thousands of miles wide, and the vast origin energy condensing into a sea behind him. Suddenly, they fell silent. They were afraid that he was going to use the origin energy to penetrate the domain alive. Is the energy tower over there ready? Hurry up and cover up the commotion here. I don't want to attract the abyssal death mist behind me with the concept body of chaos in front of us. That would be a big problem. Hui hurriedly said as he threw the energy tower with divine patterns engraved on it to I Ching. The setup is done, but we don't know how effective it is. See, he scratched his head as he walked back. He turned to look at the thousands of layers of barriers stacked inwards. With such a tight setup, it shouldn't be detected, right? I Ching's figure emerged from the void. He shook his head at Hui and the others who were looking over. There are no traces of the abyssal death mist around here. This is probably a void region that has not been discovered by either side. There shouldn't be any problems. No, I actually feel a little. Feng Qing Wang hurriedly said, Don't say it. Shut up. Hui, you've learned bad things from Maple. Everyone laughed dryly. They were all tensed up just now, waiting for Huey's heavenly voice to descend like a judgment. They did not expect to be interrupted. About 7 minutes later, the vast origin energy trembled slightly and gradually disappeared into the void. Everyone turned to see Yin Nuoxing return to his original state and hurriedly went over. This was probably the end. He waved his hand and kept muttering, "The next time I come into contact with this kind of domain, I must use the nether void sword." The force of the collision numbed my hand. Hui laughed dryly as he walked over. So the domain has been destroyed? He tried to touch it with his hand, and his palm immediately touched a layer of hard barrier. The feedback of the chaos energy made him tremble. I can touch it? 7 or 8 minutes ago, only the scene of the battle could be seen. Now the scene was still the same. However, their line of sight seemed to have passed through a layer of ripples, causing the scene behind them to become blurry. In the center of the ripples, there was a colorful light spot that kept flashing. It seemed to be the remnant of the origin energy. Destroyed, Yin Nuoxing laughed bitterly. You're thinking too much. It's just an opening. Next, we might have to go in. I Ching asked the Void frontline to send emergency reinforcements. Ask Sui Jingyun and the others to copy this. Bring 1,000,000 special energy towers here and blow this place up. Ouch! Yin Nuoxing knocked Huey's head with one hand and shook his head. He placed his hand on the light spot left by the origin energy. The origin energy surged into the void in front of them, and the faint colorful energy ripples replaced the circles of black ripples. The bright light spread and gradually solidified in the distance. Strings of strange black energy runes appeared, dyed in a colorful color, and then disappeared into the void. Along with it, the 6-foot-wide barrier in front of them disappeared. Let's go and meet this new friend. Chapter 1807. Yin Nuoxing naturally did not think that she could really go head-to-head with the Chaos Concept body. But since they met here, she had to go over and greet them. They were sealed by the gods of origin and should not be able to do as they pleased. Otherwise, they would not have taken so long to deal with this group of celestial beings. They did not have the abnormal hobby of killing, and the only thing left in their minds was to flatten the entire Order Void. Since they could not do as they pleased, if anything went wrong, they could quickly find a way to escape. Maybe they could escape or die back to the front line of the void, although it was not worth it to die here. It took a lot of effort to finally squeeze into the territory. Just as I Ching had guessed, this was another void territory, a void territory dominated by chaos. Although this was still the void of order, a large area had been dug out by the power of chaos. Currently, it was unknown how much area it had taken over. Another void territory, and it's a void territory occupied by the chaotic concept body's domain. Hui murmured after entering. He spread out his god soul and tried to explore the borders of this void territory. However, he gave up after a while. The void of order that had been dug up was much larger than he had expected. Just as they were trying to squeeze their way in, both sides of the battle, the forces of order had retreated far away because they were no match for the soldiers of chaos. Yin Nuoxing looked at them and pointed to the front without hesitation. Energy towers, blast them. Hui had just retracted his divine soul when he heard that. He shuddered and hurriedly said, "What's the use of killing chickens?" Boom! The energy tower burst out in a mighty torrent of energy with endless destructive power penetrated the void. In just 2 seconds, it had crossed the battlefield near the Chaos soldiers. The thick dark clouds and the billions of Chaos soldiers within were vaporized by the light of order. The collision of chaos and order erupted into violent energy balls, wildly expanding in the void as if there were suns blooming silently. Butcher's knife. Huey's jaw dropped in shock. After finishing his sentence, he looked at Foam with a face full of sweat. You should have told me earlier that you were going to attack from behind. You scare me to death. I thought you were really going to flatten them together in the void. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes at him. That's why I don't know what you're thinking every day. Hui laughed dryly. It's all because someone doesn't take order and chaos seriously. God knows if he would really blow up the order void on a whim one day. Even if it really happened on that day, he wouldn't be too surprised. At most, he would just watch and see what made this guy so anxious that he wanted to blow up the order void. Both sides who were in the midst of a fierce battle were startled when they saw this scene of the void collapsing. The members of the Order faction were all stunned. They watched as the mighty torrent of energy swept across the void like a sharp sword, engulfing hundreds of millions of enemies. For a moment, they were all dumbstruck and forgot to think. The Chaos soldiers were suddenly attacked, sensed an even more powerful Order power under the influence of their instincts. The remaining billions of Chaos soldiers turned their eyes in unison. Under the command of a seemingly superior individual, they turned and charged towards Yinhuashing and the others in the depths of the void. Dozens of equally vast torrents of energy appeared again, falling in an orderly manner like a curtain of light, cutting off a charging Chaos Soldier. The Chaos Soldiers behind also cooperatively crashed into the curtain of light across the void, and cooperatively crashed into a wisp of energy that dissipated into the void. Even if the Chaos Soldiers were of a higher level than the Abyssal Death Shroud spawn, they were still just a bunch of mass-produced, brainless high-level cannon fodder. They basically could not put up any effective defense or counterattack in the face of such an energy bombardment. However, this batch of Chaos Soldiers was of a very low level in terms of quality. After all, they were only comparable to celestial gods. There was no need for energy towers to deal with them. It was just that they needed to get used to using energy towers. The curtain of light condensed from an unprecedentedly powerful torrent of energy swept across, clearing the entire void in front of them. The immeasurable destructive energy made everyone's heart tremble a few times. Each energy flash and burst of energy would cause them to unwittingly take a few steps back. They could not even see where the attack came from, and could only see that the enemy was rapidly vanishing under the uniform torrent, as if it was a nightmare. The bizarre scene finally ended after half a minute. There was no sign of chaos energy within the range of their senses. Just as the commander of order breathed a sigh of relief, someone beside him suddenly cried out, "Sir, someone's coming." The commander of the order's expression trembled. His subordinates subconsciously gathered around him. Everyone had a nervous and blank look on their faces as they looked forward. In the void, a group of unusually conspicuous people appeared in front of them. When they sensed the power of order on their bodies, all of them let out a sigh of relief. However, they quickly raised their hands to be on alert. The hundreds of people scattered in the void quickly regrouped. The surging energy on their bodies did not seem to have any intention of stopping. Phew, we're on the same side. There's no need to be nervous. They didn't use the energy torrent just now to get rid of us. We're on the same side now. The commander of order waved his hand at the nervous crowd, and then he muttered to himself with a little doubt, "Are they people from the upper realm? People with such power should be from the upper realm. However, why would people from the upper realm come to this remote and desolate place? Could it be that they had finally found their conscience and wanted to lend a helping hand to this place? Or something like that? No, that should be a daydream. Maybe some big boss was just passing by and happened to see them. Since they were in a good mood today, they might as well save them along the way. People from the upper realm? His subordinates furrowed their brows when they heard that. Even though they were just saved by others, they did not put down the weapons in their hands. Instead, they looked at the few people who were gradually approaching them with vigilance. They looked at each other, not daring to relax. "Sir, give the order. I don't believe that people from the upper realm would have any good intentions." One of his subordinates said coldly, "That's right. Why would people from the upper realm care about them? Yo, you're not scared, are you?" Hui raised his hand and showed a friendly smile of 10,000% to greet them. As a result, he saw a group of people looking at them with vigilant eyes. He could not help but be stunned for a moment. He subconsciously turned around and looked at Maple. Well, they were in the form of order. They were not tainted with the aura of chaos, so there was no problem. These little guys were so vigilant. They must have been frightened by the power just now. It was just like how they had been fooling around for 5 or 6 eras, and now they had all become lunatics who would go all out to kill low-level cannon fodder. Using 1 second to fill in the blanks in his mind, Hui coughed softly and smiled. "Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. We're just a group of people who were passing by. We just happened to see you guys being besieged, so we reached out to help." His words seemed to confirm some of the guesses of the group in front of him. All of them showed a slightly relaxed expression. The middle-aged man who looked like a commander walked out of the crowd and showed an appropriate etiquette. He clasped his hands at Hui and said calmly, "Thank you for your help. My name is Gu Jiaheng. As you can see, I'm just a small commander in the lower realm." Yin Nuoxing and the others were stunned when they heard his indifferent tone. They expressed their doubts through the soul transmission at the same time. Moreover, the way he deliberately explained where he was from sounded a little strange. If they were in the divine realm, if they were living in the holy city of the divine land, when they were introducing themselves to others, they might say, "I'm from the holy city of the divine land." However, they would not add divine realm in front of it, let alone the three words upper realm. Everyone knew that this place was the divine realm of the upper realm. It was as if everyone knew that this place was the lower realm, but they deliberately emphasized it. Forget it. It should be nothing. It just sounded a little strange. Huey's expression did not change. He laughed, thought for a moment, and said, "Cloud Continent, Hui. You should not have heard of this name. After all, we have been hiding in a corner and fighting among ourselves." The commander of the Order of the Lower Realm nodded calmly. He was indifferent to Huey's friendly expression. He was even a little cautious and vigilant. "I wonder what you people from the Cloud Continent are planning to do in the lower realm. What are we planning to do?" Hui scratched his head. They had not discussed this question yet. They just saw that this place was a little strange, so they came in without thinking. As for what they were planning to do, they really did not think about it. They subconsciously blurted out, "Moving. Ahem, no, we just came out for a walk. We're looking for something while we're at it." Gu Jiaheng and the others had a strange expression when they heard this strange explanation. However, in short, they did not feel any hostility or malice from the other party. It was as if they could communicate normally. They looked at each other for a moment and put down the weapons in their hands. "But it's possible that we're here to fight while we're at it." A group of people suddenly raised their weapons with a nervous look on their faces. Hui was also stunned for a moment. He finished his next sentence. "And those annoying things. Well, if we see them here, they'll probably fight, just like just now." Then the group relaxed again and breathed a sigh of relief. They all thought that a fight was going to break out soon. "Is there any place to rest nearby? We've been wandering around in the void for a few days. We're a little tired." The commander looked at Huey's group and hesitated for a moment before nodding and saying, "If it's just a rest, it's time for us to go back. You can come with us, but the conditions aren't that good." They led the way in front, and the group of people from Yun Nuo planet followed behind at a moderate pace. Even at this moment, they could still feel that there were many people in the former group who were vigilant and slightly hostile towards them, which made them feel puzzled. "Fo, what do you think?" Hui said through the soul transmission. "I don't know." Hui smiled bitterly. He looked at Gu Jiaheng and the others in front of him, and then turned his head to look at the void. "We haven't finished exploring the void yet. I feel that this place is a little strange. I can't put my finger on it. It's strange everywhere. It's normal. This is a space dominated by the order of chaos. The internal rules are still order because this is still the order of the void. However, the outer shell is already filled with the aura of chaos." I know that. That's not what I'm talking about." Hui waved his hand and stretched out his finger and twirled it in front of his eyes. "It's the kind of strange feeling that I can't put my finger on. It's just that I feel that something's not right." Feng Qing Wang seemed to understand what he was trying to say. As the top power of order, we're being guarded by another power of order. Moreover, we're on the battlefield between order and chaos. That's the situation. Hui snapped his fingers and turned around to face Feng. He floated backward and said, "When we were dealing with the abyssal death mist in the past, I don't think anyone was so vigilant against us, right? Weren't they very cooperative? In the face of this void disaster, order and chaos are of the same family. At least, this is the case when we're fighting against the order of chaos." "Vigilant?" Yin Nuoxing looked forward. His overly indifferent eyes made contact with the gazes of some people who quietly turned back to look at them. The latter and the others were shocked. They hurriedly retracted their gazes and broke out in cold sweat. This is hostility. This is not vigilance. They have the intention to fight, but they are suppressed by their own commander. Without orders, they should not act rashly. See, he was puzzled. Why? God knows what's going on. Yin Nuoxing looked up at the void. The origin energy quietly gushed out and touched the conceptual layer of the rules. It was only natural that it was sealed. No matter what, this is the territory of the chaos concept body. Although I don't know how it managed to reach into the order void, it's best for us to be more cautious. With the concept layer sealed, we have to be prepared for a battle with the chaos concept body at any time under the coverage of the law of chaos. We quickly said, should we expand our forces? Should we ask for reinforcements from the front line? The frontline forces all have places to go. Let's not alarm them. Yin Nuoxing shook his head. Everything that had been arranged was progressing rapidly according to their respective paths, and it was not advisable to disrupt the progress at this time. Although we may have to fight a battle, we can still run if we can't win. There's no need to fight to the death with the chaos concept body at this time, and it's not the time to do so. All right, we shrugged and reached out to I Ching and the others who were floating around in the unfamiliar void. Everyone, how's the situation? We haven't found the border of the void. It's either a void that extends all the way or has a vague border, and it's very large. The power of chaos doesn't seem to be very powerful. Nothing out of the ordinary for now. Continue exploring the void. We've just set up the power of order. The 300 million talismans left in various parts of the void are guaranteed to work during critical moments. I Ching said, giving everyone a thumbs up. Why did you start already? Hui stared blankly. Had the lad been accumulating power since he came in? 300 million talismans in the blink of an eye. Your Excellency I Ching, please don't be so nervous. Hui breathed a sigh of relief when someone tried to dissuade him. Then, that person took out an energy ball and smiled. I got this from logistics. There are 100 million scrapped origin energy towers in it. We can throw them out at any time. I found a place with good feng shui. I'm building energy towers here. There's no one here, so you can come if you want. It won't be too late to move after building millions of energy towers. This is the realm of chaos, after all. It's not safe to wander in the void without something in hand. I'm planning to make a few more of those. Sure enough, the front line of the void was full of lunatics. These guys, they were sent out to search for the order void, not to fight with the abyss death mist. They even brought such a huge amount of explosives and found a place to build energy towers. They were afraid that they couldn't blow up other people's void. 100 million scrapped origin energy towers could directly penetrate the defense of a high-level premier. They were already a little crazy to begin with, and their minds were filled with thoughts of shattering the void and piercing through the chaotic void. Now that they had run into the domain of the chaotic concept body, it was as if they were out of control, and they wished that they could sink the entire void into the void. This group of killing machines of the Order Void. Hopefully, they wouldn't sink the people of the Order world into the void too. Don't be like this. Yin Nuoxing also felt that something was wrong. She shook her head and said to everyone, Do you want a raise? I have. You better know your place. Hui pressed hard on Maple's mouth. This void was already in danger. You, the number one killing machine of the Order Void, shouldn't act recklessly. Following Gu Jiaheng and the others, they left the remote void. After a while, the light spots of the world orbs began to gradually enter their vision. In front of them, there was a large area of sparse world orbs. Some of the world orbs were very close to each other. Some of the world orbs were relatively far away from each other. However, as a whole, they were very close to each other. They were so close that they could gather together to form an entire world group. There were thousands of world orbs here. They could form a small world group. Maple looked between those world orbs. Huey's sharp eyes discovered something. He pointed to the side. Yin Nuoxing turned her gaze. In the place where Hui pointed, there were 3 to 5 world orbs gathered together. They were connected by weak energy threads. See? Hui noticed a slight change in his expression. He pointed to another place and said, Look at the others. They all seem to be in the same situation. Some of the world orbs floating alone in the void had already gathered together. They were slowly evolving toward a world group. However, at present, there were only 5 world orbs gathered together. The others were mostly in groups of 2, or 3. According to the normal situation of a world, orbs evolving into a world group, This phenomenon should not occur. All the world groups should be slowly moving towards the largest world orb. It should be man-made. Hui scratched his head and said, but for what purpose? Indeed, it was man-made. Yin Nuoxing's eyes were filled with a colorful luster. The change in the scene in front of him made him confused. However, it was man-made. This used to be a world group. However, it was torn into pieces and became the sparse appearance that we see. It's like a destroyed spider web. Only a small part of it is still hanging. Hui and see you were stunned. Why? How would I know? Was it done by the soldiers of chaos? No. There are no traces of the presence of chaos here. Moreover, if the energy of chaos has grown strong enough to tear the world group apart, it would be enough to turn the entire world group into its lair. It would not be a situation where half of it was destroyed. Feng Qingwang narrowed her eyes and said, so, it was man-made. That's the only explanation. Yin Nuoxing nodded slightly. We're here. The small commander of the order suddenly stopped. He turned around and looked at Yin Nuoxing and the others. He saw that they were frowning as they looked at the world orb in front of them. Perhaps he felt that they had noticed something, so he said, this place has no name now. If we forget their presence, we can't even find the existence of this place through other means. It's just a small place in the lower realm. The environment is not as good as the upper realm. It can only be a place for you to rest. There's nothing else you can do. It's meaningless. Come in. He shook his head and waved his hand. He led the others into the world orb at the front. Yin Nuoxing and the others looked at each other and followed. After entering the world orb, you could not help but ask, it has no name now. Does that mean that this place used to have a name? That's right. Gu Jiaheng nodded at her. It used to have a name. Hui shrugged. Because the world group was torn apart, it was normal that it did not have a name. Normally, no one would give a name to a single world orb. It was meaningless. As long as you remembered the presence of the world you were in, you would not have to worry about not being able to return home. Gu Jiaheng looked gloomy. He did not seem to want to explain these things. So he did not ask further. However, some things cannot be covered up just because he did not want to ask or say. We did not intend to let him remain silent. The world group was torn apart, so it has no name. Then, can't we just rebuild it? He said this on purpose. He wanted to see how this group of people would react. Sure enough, when his voice fell, the group of people all stopped in their tracks. They all turned their heads and looked at them with extremely complicated and even unfriendly gazes. Gu Jiaheng also frowned. When he noticed that Hui did not have any ill intentions and was still looking at them with a friendly expression, he also did not quite understand. He shook his head. As you said, it is meaningless to rebuild a name that has been torn apart. The scars that have been healed are still scars. They will not fade away just because the scars have healed. Forget it. Let's not talk about this. Maybe to you, it is just a code name. There is no need to talk about it. The atmosphere was even weirder now. However, we also found out something that he wanted to know. He turned around and gave Feng a thumbs up. Feng rolled his eyes. Feng Qingwang pulled Yin Nuoxing's sleeve. She whispered in her soul, is the name very important to the world group? It depends on the meaning of the name. To us, it is not important. However, we do not know what others think. Yin Nuoxing blinked and said, suppose we live in a city in the Taiyuan region for 100 million years. One day, the city was torn apart by the enemy and could not be rebuilt. In the future, when people talked about it, they would subconsciously use the word ruins. How would you feel? Feng Qingwang pursed her red lips. Probably very sad. Maybe angry. Maybe in a trance. That is probably how it is for them. Yin Nuoxing patted her hair. The world group was torn apart by the forces of order and the hatred and resentment in their eyes. When they met for the first time, there was no conflict and no resentment. In other words, the target of resentment was the concept that they represented, the concept that Gu Jiaheng and the others recognized. The people from the upper plane tore apart the world group. Yin Nuoxing rolled her eyes and said softly in her soul, I Ching, stop what you are doing. Go and investigate the phenomenon in the lower plane, a collective phenomenon. It seems that I found something not very interesting. Hui, Si Yu and Qingwang looked at each other. The internal strife of the world of order. They had experienced it once before. Chapter 1808. The weak void, energy, and spatial power released by the teleportation gradually subsided, leaving behind a palm-sized, twisting vortex in the starry sky. The group from Yin Nua planet finally arrived at Gu Jiaheng and the others' lair. Just as they had said on the way here, this was a barren place. Not to mention what was in front of them. The number of stars in this star field was relatively small, and most of them were gathered together as if they were huddling together for warmth. The number of stars was low, but the density was high, so it made the entire star field appear very empty. The number of stars in this star field was much lower than the number of light clusters in normal worlds. The small planetary system that Gu Jiaheng and the others were in was not considered lonely. A bright light blue fireball was accompanied by dozens of planets. 3 inner and 3 outer circles were densely packed, and their orbits were also spaced out. It looked like each planet was in a state where they would not affect each other. Well, that was strange. The entire planetary system was full of traces of man-made modification. On the surface, it did not matter if it was intolerable or not, as long as it was forcefully integrated and modified by the power of higher life forms. There would be no problem. In this planetary system, the most primitive thing was, well, that light blue fireball was a naturally born star in the planetary system without any trace of man-made modification. Of the 30 to 40 planets, half of them clearly had traces of life activities, and the other half had traces of existing life activities. There were some strange buildings on them, which seemed to have some function. Although we wanted to immediately ask or find out by himself, he thought of the subtle, unfriendly attitude of Gu Jiang and the others and held back the thought. This was not the time to do something that could easily cause misunderstandings. It was not too late to slowly explore when they left. After all, I Ching and the others were also investigating. The middle-aged commander raised his head and looked at the stars for a while before speaking to them. I wanted to bring you to the first planet, but strangers are not allowed to enter the central area before being screened. So I could only bring you here. When you go in, you will have to go through a purification process. He paused for a moment, looked at Hui and the others, and let out a sigh. Forget it. Anyway, the low-level purification here is just a small trick for people from the upper realm. You don't have the presence of chaos on you, so there's no need for that. We have suffered a lot in this battle. We have to go back and tidy up. You can do whatever you want here, but do not go to the uninhabited planets nearby. There is a defensive barrier there, and, as mentioned before, trespassing without permission will be attacked. That's all. Please have a good rest. If you need, I will bring you around when I'm free. Gu Jiaheng saluted Hui and the others and led them away from the planet. When the others left, they looked at Hui and the others with a rather complicated expression, and, as Maple said, there was a slight hostility in their eyes for a while, and they were very worried. Hui had every reason to believe that this group of people had intended to do something to them, but he knew that he was not strong enough, and his group was still in a state of battle. He could only suppress the many thoughts in his mind and follow his commander towards the inner part of the planet. The look of wanting to do something, but completely unable to do anything to them, made him feel inexplicably comfortable. How is it, this place? Walking on the wide street on the ground, we looked around for a while and asked Maple with a slightly sideways glance. Barren, various meanings. It was a simple comment, but it completely described the state of this place, this region, this planet, this star system, and this starry sky in one go. However, he felt that he had finished, but when it fell into Huey's ears, he grimaced in confusion, and he had to say more. You should be able to recognize it just by looking around. Barrenness is a literal barrenness. It's the same everywhere. It's not just this planet that's in this situation. CU and Blue Phoenix looked around and could not help but frown. Yes, it was really barren. If they had to change the word, perhaps it could be said that it was disorderly. It was like some places that had experienced years of war or natural disasters. So, when the city was difficult to repair, materials were scarce, and the environment was not good, slums. However, for a city, slums could only account for 20% to 50% of the total composition. But here, the general situation was barren. There were no streets. Since this was the inner part of the city, the ground was not paved with smooth blue stones, nor was it covered with a thick layer of crystals as smooth as a mirror. It was just an ordinary lush road, and one could see weeds, gravel, and mud. There was no distinction to speak of. They could not see how long or wide the streets were, nor could they see the dividing line. Even the shops, houses, functional buildings, and other buildings around were placed randomly. As for the symbol that allowed them to recognize that this was a city, not a small town or a rural area, it was a defensive equipment built by a circle of broken stone walls and fences. It was really a city wall, but it was very difficult to see that it was a city wall. Among the citizens wandering in this city, there were ordinary people and also cultivators with various levels of cultivation. Naturally, there were some high-level life forms hidden in some places in the city, but compared to other worlds, the number was too small. Even in the lower plane, there were not so few. Moreover, this kind of environment was not limited to this planet. A little further away, near the inner circle and the planet where Gu Jiaheng and the others were on were almost the same. If he did not know, he would have thought that the group of people deliberately arranged them here to discuss them. It is indeed a little shabby. Huey's cheeks twitched, and he looked around in confusion. Why is it like this? There are high-level life forms here. Although the number is a little small, the entire star system has at least 2,000 or 3,000 high-level life forms, right? The divine realm can already change and reverse the rules by themselves and create a place with good feng shui. No, they don't even need to be in the divine realm. As long as they are in the later stages of the divine realm, they can do it. They just need to put in a little effort. Why do they have to live like this? His gaze passed through the leaky mud wall and landed on the alley, and he could see a group of dirty children in tattered clothes, shouting slogans, punching and kicking there, looking very energetic. In front of them was a middle-aged man in coarse linen clothes, and his realm was not weak. Looking at the scene, he should be teaching the children how to cultivate. Shabby. Huey's cheeks twitched a few times, and the corner of his mouth trembled a little. But Feng Qinghuang's eyes flashed with pink light, and she looked around for a while, and then she said in a low voice, "Although the conditions look bad, everyone's mental state is very good, and their life force is normal. Some of them are a little tired, but only some old people. Most of the ordinary people are not sick or in pain, and none of them are thin and weak to match the environment here." Is that what you mean by although the environment is shabby, but they are living well? Huey's cheeks twitched again. You can't say that this is the style of this world, right? There is not much difference between this planet and most of the planets with life. If there was something that stood out, it would definitely be the sun of their home, a huge light blue fireball. Even if they were far enough away, they could still see that it took up 1/10 of the sky. Other than that, what else was there? He looked at it. The air was a little thin, but there was enough energy to sustain life, so it was not a big problem. The energy density was also at the level of the lower plane. Ordinary people could adapt to the rules and energy density here, so they would not feel uncomfortable. However, ordinary people from other planets would feel uncomfortable if they came here. Besides that, more than 90% of the things on this planet were natural, and the remaining 10% were traces left by human activities, such as the houses. Although there were many gathering places, they were generally small, and the number of living beings was not particularly high. Not only the human race, there were also very few other living beings in the wilderness. This could only be attributed to the fact that the natural environment of this planet was not particularly good. The place they were in was the largest plain. Away from here, there were mostly mountains, hills, mountains, and valleys. The sky was clear and bright with a deeper shade of blue, and the clouds were also faintly blue. It seemed that it was not the effect of the big guy, but he did not analyze this part of the matter. Apart from the terrain mentioned just now, there are not many places where vegetation grew, and there were not many sparsely covering many places. It looked like there were a lot of them, but when gathered together, looking from the starry sky, it was probably just a small patch of green. Based on the size of this patch of green and the size of the ocean, it would probably suffocate the life on this planet in a few years. Oh, that was not right. There are not many life on this planet, and there was a suitable, normal energy cycle, so it would be fine. Are you studying the origin and ecological environment of this planet? Yin Nuashing could not help but look at Hui and asked. She kept muttering to herself in her soul. I'm just taking a look. Well, I'll tell you about it. Yin Nuashing coughed softly and cleared her throat. This planet itself is artificially formed, and so is this star system. In the entire star system, only the blue sun does not belong here. The rest are local. It should have been moved here to look after the star system that was formed after the catalysis. The environment on these planets is not suitable for normal life. There are too many unsuitable conditions in the ecological system. I'm too lazy to talk about this part, so I'll skip this part. The reason why there are living beings here must be because they have been artificially modified. It would be weird if those celestial beings did not do anything. As for the living beings here, they were not born in this star system. They were moved here. Their composition and aura are different from the original living beings here. There is no rejection. They can adapt to the environment, and they can live normally. This is also one of the results of the modification. Including all the living beings on other planets, they came from the same place. They wandered here and settled down here, but stop. We quickly stopped Maple, who wanted to continue. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. I just took a look. You don't have to say it so clearly. Oh, Hui smiled bitterly. He was not really interested in the origin of the planet. He was just a little confused that there were so many high-level beings living here, but so poor. However, he had come here as a wanderer. He had fled from his home that had already been destroyed and was struggling to survive in the distant starry sky. He had seen many such things. He had lived for more than a dozen epochs and had seen many things. Bah, he had said the same thing every time. He had seen some strange things every time. However, it was still very strange, since their former home had been destroyed once, and they had escaped to this place with great difficulty. Shouldn't they have started a new life and lived more comfortably? Plus, with some fighting spirit, they shouldn't have turned the entire star system into such a state. He looked at the poor scene around him, and his cheeks twitched. It was very poor. Boss, you have thousands of high-level beings. Yin Nuashing and the others listened to Huey's complaints the whole way through the soul transmission. The four of them walked on the street, rode, walking on the ground. They were seriously out of tune with the surroundings. Look at the clothes of the people around them. Coarse linen clothes, full of patches, comparable to a coarse cloth coat that had been remade. Some of them wore shoes, and some ran barefoot on the yellow earth, not afraid of knocking their feet on the ground. Then, they turned back to look at the four of them. They were all dressed up, neatly wearing the clothes of 5 eras. Hiss, why did it feel like they were the same? This lower plane is a little weird, Siyu muttered softly as she scratched Yin Nuashing's hair. What are the other places like? Perhaps we just happened to come to a place that is more poor? Regrettably, the entire world orb is the same, including 2 or 3 world orbs next door. It could even be assumed that the hundreds of world orbs around us are the same, maintaining a more primitive and backward stage, Yin Nuashing said, pinching her fingers. The Void Frontline would not be like this. That's true. Hui smiled bitterly. Leaving the Frontline world aside, every member of the Void Frontline is 100% high-level beings, masters who could survive by breathing deeply into the void. Moreover, the Frontline world is a place where we nurture new forces and export new forces. That place is stuffed with all good conditions, and now the energy and rules inside are about to be replaced with origin energy and rules. How could you say the conditions are not good? Still, there was no superiority to speak of. On the contrary, it was precisely because they were at the Void Frontline that they needed such conditions to maintain the eternal war. If they simply removed a few conditions, the Frontline might have already fallen during the Underworld's greatest assault in the last few eras. Furthermore, Those were conditions that Maple had risked his life to bring back. If they did not use those conditions, they might as well jump into the abyssal death mist and commit suicide. Then what about other places? So you did not think that every place was like that, and said, unwilling to give up, places further away from the void we are in. You mean over there? I Ching and the others have been investigating for a while. Let's hear the news. We replied with an O. Everyone focused their attention on the soul communication. Everyone, let's talk about the situation. Lord Maple, Lord Hui, this place is a little mystical. I think it's so mystical that the front line would send reinforcements. This place, it would take 7 to 8 years to tidy up after moving back. I Ching replied with immeasurable awe, causing Cuyu's face to twitch. It's one thing for a group of high-level beings to build infrastructure here, but I heard that it took thousands of years. I thought that there would be a place where high-level beings would be as numerous as dogs, with heavenly gods everywhere and divine palaces everywhere, as if the gods were living in the mortal realm. But when I saw the development of this planet, damn, walking when you go out, shouting when you talk, thatched huts, coarse linen clothes, and 7,000 to 8,000 heavenly gods after integrating the entire world's light clusters are gone. Now that you've finished, I have nothing else to say. Where did you all go? I think the environment here is quite good. Look at the green mountains and clear waters, the blue sky and white clouds, rare beasts, distant nature, tranquil and harmonious. Where is everyone? Everyone asked in unison. There's no one. You're King bullshitting. But there's really no one around here. I found 29 worlds light clusters, and all of them have no people. Let alone humans, there aren't many intelligent beings. After much difficulty, I finally found a planet that seemed to have something, but the result was even more ridiculous. There isn't even life on it, and it's the only planet in the entire world of light cluster. The rest are all suns, and the sky is filled with suns. What a godforsaken place. Summing up the information that they had gathered, it was as if they had come to a godforsaken place. It was a place where high-level beings lived in poverty, but everyone was in high spirits. There were very few patients, and those who could cultivate were still cultivating. The ordinary people were still living ordinary lives. This was a fact that had not changed at all. Other than that, I found 22 scenes of the battle between order and chaos in the void. There's one on your side too. A total of 177 times, and the intensity of the battle is not particularly high. I Ching said as he waved his arms. Lord Feng, Lord Hui, I suggest that we go to the middle and upper planes to check out the situation. From what I've heard from the people here, the situation in the lower planes seems to be related to the upper planes. I think the lower planes are more or less like this. All right, you all go first. We'll check out the situation in the lower planes. This void region is full of dissonance. Returning their attention to the main plane, the four of them looked at each other for a moment. Yin Nuashing shrugged. See, what did I say? In the end, the lower planes and the upper planes shouldn't have too much interaction. I'm also very curious as to why there's such a strong interaction. For now, let's see what I Ching and the others have. Smack! Yin Nuashing said as she widened her eyes and slapped herself on the forehead. The movement was so loud that Hui and the two girls were shocked. What's wrong? What's wrong? I've been talking about the upper planes and lower planes for a long time. Don't you find it strange? Yin Nuashing put her hand on her forehead and said, This is the lower planes, inside someone else's territory. Where did the upper, middle, and lower planes come from? There should only be the lower planes here. Hui was stunned. Huff, 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 it's haunted. He had forgotten about it. What the hell? Yin Nuashing pulled her bangs and frowned. There are only two guesses at the moment. The first is that the territory is directly related to the concept of the upper, middle, and lower planes, and we just came from the lower planes. With the power of the chaotic concept body, it shouldn't be difficult. We asked, what about the other one? This is the chaotic void. The three of them. Alas, they felt a chill down their backs. Headache. I feel a headache everywhere. Hui let out a long breath and shook his head violently. Let's talk about the bigger picture later. We can't figure it out now. We can only figure out the problem at hand first. Then, there's no time to lose. Let's find the high-level life forms guarding this place to understand the situation. Feng, it's your turn. Find a place where the plot can be triggered. Yin Nuashing. That's right. We can't figure out other people's territories in a short time, but we'll figure out eventually. Now, we should prioritize the situation at hand. Hui slapped him on the shoulder. There are more than 200 high-level life forms on this planet. Just find a place, and you'll definitely trigger a point. Don't hit me. I was wrong. Seeing Hui run forward with his hands on his head, Yin Nuashing put down her hand and sighed helplessly. It was the only way. She pointed forward with her chin. Then, let's go forward. Where are we going? Hui ran back in a flash. I don't know. I just chose the nearest one. You said you wanted to find the high-level life forms to understand. There's a celestial active a few hundred miles ahead. Let's find it. All right. Hui shrugged. He said he wanted to find someone to ask and look for someone to see. In fact, some things had already been touched. The fragmented information could almost be put together. From the beginning to the end, it was probably a more ordinary mess. A mess in the order void. As for whether or not there was a hidden agenda, who knew? However, right or wrong was never something that could be easily determined, regardless of whether one was an insider or an outsider. An insider might have no choice but to do so, and might only choose to do what was most beneficial to them. An outsider would only look at the situation one-sidedly, and would probably think that this was a group of bastards from the upper plane joining forces to oppress the lower plane. In other words, there was an internal strife in the order world. It sounded very stupid. When the entire order world was facing a catastrophe, there were still people who could squeeze into a group and fight for some small benefits. Well, it was impossible that there were no such people. Not to mention this void territory, there were also such people on their side. They had even set their sights on the void front line, although they had not appeared in the past 5 eras. But for the sake of the fleeting peace and false stability of the order world, they must not mention this to Maple. Something big was going to happen. To put it bluntly, they did not know much about the void territory. A one-sided judgment was useless. If they were to make an overly subjective judgment in the end, it would be embarrassing. However, this was also influenced by Gu Jiaheng and the others. When the words upper realm were mentioned, their hostility skyrocketed. It was as if there was an irreconcilable hatred between them. It was not their fault for thinking the wrong way. What if it's really an internal strife? Feng Qingwang whispered. What if? We frowned and sighed. 5 years ago, we had integrated most of the forces in the order world. Later on, we had accumulated little by little to build up the void frontline today. But that is our territory. This is the domain of the chaos concept body. We have not thought about whether our actions would affect the chaos concept body or this domain. We don't dare to act recklessly. What do you think, Maple? Let's wait and see. Yin Nuashing was expressionless. When the war between order and chaos is going on, there is not much need for internal strife in the order world. But even if we want to stop it, we have no right to intervene. Like you said, this place is not our territory. It's not good for us to intervene. In the past, we only intervened a little in other worlds. But if we were to stir up trouble in the entire void territory here, are we going to repeat the farce you did in the Cloud Continent? Hui tilted his head, and then suppress the entire void territory? We'll beat them up if necessary. Chapter 1809. The group of 4 carried a lot of doubts and curiosity in their hearts as they slowly walked through this piece of land. Everything in their line of sight and senses seemed peaceful and calm. In their eyes, it was like a small village in the countryside. They were walking on the yellow mud road, and fortunately, they did not encounter the mud that was bound to appear after the rain. The local people were simple and honest, and there was nothing strange about it. However, if some other conditions were added, everything here would become out of place. Everything was very out of place, and everything that was very normal looked wrong no matter how they looked at it. Just like what he had just said, he had already said it several times, but he still had to say it again. This was the lower plane's far border. Putting aside the fact that there were two planes that shouldn't exist in this domain, the place where they were now was just like any other lower plane's far border. They were affected by the chaos void, and every 3 to 5 days they would fight. This area could be said to be the front line of the war, a border that separated peace and chaos. In front of them was the chaos void, and behind them was the upper and middle planes. The people who guarded the border of the lower plane lived a life of uncertainty, and it was possible that they would die any time. No one could say for sure. None of the above was a problem. Therefore, under normal circumstances, it meant that the border they were should be guarded by considerable power of order, and the number of higher beings should be sufficient. And under the premise that there were higher beings, the planets and worlds here should be full of signs of force modification. There were sentries every few steps, and the first star behind them was like a big city. It looked prosperous, but it was actually transformed barracks. No, let's not talk about the situation in the Void frontline. They had no choice, and the situation in the Void frontline was even more ridiculous than that. They only talked about the situation in the middle and lower realm that they saw in their Void domain. For example, when the Heavenlight realm and the Abyssal Death Shroud encirclement came before them, they still resisted for a long time. Their home was still prosperous, and they would soon recover after the war ended. Although they were now part of the Void frontline and the war was far from over, they could only leave their home to recuperate beside the frontline world. Ahem, that was what it meant. But in front of them, the number of high-level life forms was so small that he could write a big danger on the head of the light blob in this world. If the soldiers of chaos charged over, they would probably fall apart. Then there was the situation in front of them. The village, the city, well, the city that looked like a small village did not have any real roads. The roads between the houses were flat and could be used as roads. It was not even flat as it rose and fell, one high and one low, one high and one low. The land was also not planned. Houses of all sizes were built randomly. It was common for dozens of small buildings to surround a slightly bigger house, or vice versa. As for those houses, they were more like small sheds built with stones and planks on the yellow earth. They were primitive and simple, with men plowing and women weaving. There were no shops or peddlers. The trade was probably still in the stage of bartering. At present, it was not a problem to put this scene in some ordinary and backward place. Then came the anomaly. Among the hundreds of thousands of lives, there were cultivators, post-divine, and celestial beings. Plus, all of them were full of wisdom. Yes, not the uncivilized kind. Just by looking at their spiritual waves, one could know what they were thinking. They still knew how big the sky was, how big the world was, how vast the starry sky was, and what the concept of the void was. Oh, ordinary people did not know about the void. Well, outrageous. This extreme contrast was outrageous. Don't tell me it's some weird illusion or dream again. Hui frowned. No matter what, it's still too incongruous. Yinwashing looked around thoughtfully. The origin energy flowed and isolated everything he saw and felt in the space surrounded by the origin energy. He then came to a conclusion. This is a normal space. All right. Hui spread his hands and did not pay attention to that strange point. He tried to accept it, but they were surprisingly inconspicuous. They did not activate cognitive blur and swaggered along the street. Whether it was those who passed by them or those who were a little further away, they only glanced at them slightly and treated them as ordinary people who could be seen everywhere on the street. After that, they withdrew their gaze and hurriedly walked away. No one came forward to ask them who these outsiders who were obviously different from the locals were. Well, he felt that it should be an unprecedented thing for a group of people who were walking around in splendid attire, even if they had not changed their clothes for 5 eras, to appear in a world with only coarse linen clothes. Paying close attention to the expressions of those people, there was a slight evasiveness in their eyes, but they were certainly paying attention. However, compared to curiosity, they seemed to want to hide as far away as possible. They glanced at them just to identify what was in front of them, and when they completely recognized them, they could not wait to leave as if they had never seen them. Moreover, the speed at which they hid did not seem to be in a hurry or panic. It was very natural, making him think of a group of people who had been driven away by natural disasters and had long been used to it, discovering, then getting used to it, and habitually avoiding it. It was already quite friendly that they did not close the doors and windows on the spot and leave the entire street empty. "We're here." Yin Nuashing stopped. Hui and Siyu followed his gaze and looked along the straight road under their feet. At the end of the street, behind a few small mud houses that were side by side, there was a house that was 3 or 4 times bigger than the surrounding buildings. There was a fence around it, and it looked like a mansion made of mud. Huh, this is the place where the sky god lives. They came to a place a few meters in front of the house and looked at this sky god palace that was 10 feet in length and width and 20 feet in height. Hui suddenly fell silent. Seems like he's not at home. Sia looked around the house from a place about 3 or 4 meters away from the fence and ran back to ask Yin Nuashing. It was here just now. Yin Nuashing blinked and was about to use the origin energy to look around when he heard faint footsteps not far away. "Venerable gods from the upper realm, what brings you here?" The voice behind them made the 4 of them turn around together. The footsteps gradually stopped, and a figure stopped about 2 feet away from them. They looked together and saw a girl who looked about 17 or 18 years old. Ah, to hell with the numerical age. Anyway, she looked like this age. She had extremely long hair, and 2/3 of her long black hair seemed to have faded. It was slightly pale and could only be barely recognized as black. Only 1/3 of her hair still maintained its normal black color. Her figure was slender, and she looked more petite than some of the boys and girls of the same age outside. In terms of appearance, she was also extremely beautiful. She wore the same hand-woven coarse clothing as the people in this village. I mean, the style of short skirt. Her exposed skin was the same as her long hair, fading slightly pale. It was not that her skin was in patches. The left side of her skin was dark, and the right side had faded. It was either that, or overall, she looked very white, but there was also a touch of gray. Damn it, if one walked closer from a distance, they would probably see this girl flickering between gray and white. Was she related to the humanoid, glowing object next to him? Ah, it's her, Yin Nuashing said faintly in his soul. It seems like she sensed us coming in advance, and she's planning to hide? No, we came from the left side of the row of houses, and she's on the right side. She probably wants to come out and greet us? Seeing that Yin Nuashing and the others did not respond, the girl took a light breath and spoke again. "May I know what the matter is?" Her tone sounded like she was suppressing some impatience. Looking closely at her expression and gaze, it was not surprising that she was not very friendly. However, she was not too vigilant, as if she was unhappy that they had come to disturb her. When Hui was about to speak, the girl spoke again, and her voice gradually became impatient. "What are you doing here? Can you tell us your purpose clearly? We're very busy." Hui subconsciously said, "We're here to be bystanders." "Girl." She frowned and looked suspiciously at the 4 people in front of her who looked like they lived like princes. Other than the aura and temperament of the upper realm, she could not sense their realms. They seemed to be young men and women from some famous family, and they were probably around the heavenly god realm. She seemed to understand what he meant by being bystanders. She could not help but let out a light breath and said faintly, "Although I don't know why you're here, there's nothing interesting here. As you can see, there's only yellow soil and mud. If you want to travel the world, why not go to the middle or upper realms?" "Take a guess?" Siyu said with a grin. "Girl, forget it. It's not up to me to ask what you want to do anyway." Feeling that she was asking for a snub, the girl waved her hand and slowly walked into the house. When she was about to enter, she turned around and looked at them. "Come in. Although I don't know why you're looking for me. As long as you're not looking for trouble, a simple reception is fine." It was a large house made of mud, and the only thing that seemed to be more spacious inside was a staircase that led to the 2nd floor. Walking from the side led to the main hall, where there were tables and chairs for decoration, rows and rows of chairs. Yes, that was all. She was very tight on money. In this situation, she was the same as most of the heavenly gods. She basically did not have too many things in her personal house, not even decorations. After Siyu entered the house, he ran around the hall, trying to find something special, such as the special products of this world, fun things of this world, and so on. The girl did not ask anything, as if she did not see anything. She only said faintly, "If you're looking for something confidential, you'll be disappointed. There's nothing here, and this world has no secrets to speak of. There's no special products in this world?" Siyu could not help but ask, Special products?" The girl was startled and looked at Siyu with a very strange gaze. After a moment, she sneered and opened her hands to gesture at the scene outside the window. "What special products are you looking for in this world? Or is there another meaning in your words, and you're not talking to me?" Just hearing these words made him feel more and more unfriendly. It was as if he could even hear the sound of favorability points dropping in her heart. Just how much did the people of this place hate the concept of upper planes? They had already given this concept to all life forms that were related to the upper plane. However, at the moment, it seemed that they only hated and did not welcome them at all. It had not reached the level of blind hatred. If it was the latter level, she would have rushed up to fight long ago. The girl brought out a pot of tea from a place that seemed to be the basement below the stairs and placed it on the table in the hall. She tilted her head and looked at Hui and the others. "Are you planning to stay tonight? Or will you leave in a while? Tell me first so that I can arrange what to do next." "I don't know. Maybe we'll just walk around?" Hui shook his head, casually picked up the teacup that she handed over, and took a sip. His cheeks twitched, and he smacked his lips. The aftertaste was endless. He glanced at Maple, who was deep in thought, and revealed a smirk. He said in his soul, "Maple, have a sip of tea." Yin Nuoxing lowered his head. For the time being, there were living utensils here. The teacup in front of him, this deep brownish-yellow color, could it be made of clay? And the tea inside, it was black, and there was something floating in it that did not look like tea leaves. Forget it, he would not die from drinking anyway. He took a sip, and then his face trembled. He calmly put down the teacup and stared at Hui. Damn it. He knew that Huey's little eyes must be deceitful. He even believed this silly girl's words and took a sip. He was definitely a silly girl. Damn it, this cup of tea was so bitter, and at the same time, there was an inexplicable smell of mud and fish. He drank so much that his head was about to split open. After all, he was in someone else's house, and he could not spit out the tea. The girl looked at the darkening sky, stood up and walked to the second floor. There are empty rooms on the first floor. You can use them. However, I don't prepare anything for guests to spend the night. But it shouldn't be a problem for you. It's getting dark. You should rest early. Rest? Hui held his chin and looked at Maple, who was not interested at all. He then looked at Siyu and Feng Qing Huang and suddenly said, "Is there any fun place at night?" The girl suddenly stopped and stared at him with a shocked and puzzled look. "You want to go out at night? Why? Can't I?" Hui was startled by the sudden change in her expression. Was it necessary to make such a big noise at night? Or was it forbidden for night owls to wander on the streets at night? Was it necessary? The girl saw that he was in a daze and had no idea what was going on. Her face darkened. "Didn't your elders tell you that chaos is rampant at night? Or did you say that on purpose?" The unexpected words made Yin Nuoxing and the others squint their eyes. Hui waved his hand and said, "Oh, of course I know. I mean at night, no going out, fun place." The girl's expression froze. She looked at Hui with an even weirder expression. Then she sneered, shook her head, and disappeared at the end of the stairs without any response. Hui was stunned by the weird expression. He asked Maple and the others, "Did I say something wrong?" Yin Nuoxing's cheek twitched. She looked at him speechlessly. "If you don't try to smooth things over, it will be fine. But if you try to smooth things over, you can think of your own problem." Hui was stunned. He recalled what he had just said and suddenly said, "Oh." Then he scratched his head with a silly smile. "I didn't mean that. She doesn't need you to think. It's fine as long as she thinks." Yin Nuoxing sighed. She stood up and walked to the guest room. "Let's rest early. It seems that it will be a hazy day." "Are you really going to rest?" Yin Nuoxing tilted her head and looked at Hui. She showed a slightly evil smile. "What do you think?" Hui and Siyu immediately understood. This was the expression of someone who was going to cause trouble. Let's not talk about how night, which was limited to one planet, had anything to do with chaos. But since it was mentioned, something was definitely going to happen. For what the girl said, it should not only be related to the lower planes. It should be something that the upper, middle, and lower planes all knew about and had to abide by. Since chaos was mentioned, and they knew that this was the domain of the chaos concept body, the two should be inextricably linked. I think that this should be something adults use to scare children. That is, something that every family would use to stop children from crying at night. So you could not help but say, actually, they just don't want them to make a fuss at night. But as they talked, it became a ban on going out at night. Huey's face quickly trembled a few times and was slightly stiff. Little you, that girl is at least in the heavenly god realm. She shouldn't believe that kind of nonsense at this time, right? This is a godforsaken world. It's not strange for strange things to happen, right? Anyway, what we saw today is strange enough. Siyu shrugged. He suddenly felt that this girl's words were very reasonable. Then what if it's not? If it's not? Siyu hugged Yin Nuoxing's arm and shook it a few times. She stuck out her tongue and looked at him. Little star, what if it's not? Yin Nuoxing, if it's not, then take it as a phenomenon caused by night outside. However, it doesn't sound very possible that the time is limited to one planet and the entire void follows it. The time is different in every place. Basically, it can be determined that there's a night state in a place at all times, so it's probably a problem with the concept and rules. If it's only entangled in every small place on every planet, it won't be affected if we leave this place and go to the void? Hui said, that's what I think, but in reality, Yin Nuoxing said a few words and shook her head. Let's not talk about it. We'll know at night. Don't tell me first. Hui turned his head to look out of the window. The sky had darkened a little. There was still an hour to 2 hours before the sky turned dark. Just waiting would be a little boring. Use your invincible great void encyclopedia's thinking to explain. Yin Nuoxing's face twitched a few times and sighed. There's a simple guess. It's related to the concept. Just like what I said just now, it corresponds to the concept of every small place. There's something that is given a concept will be triggered in a state. So, combined with the sentence just now, the concept that is given should be, Siyu answered quickly, time. It should be night. Yin Nuoxing shook her head and flicked her head lightly. As I said just now, time is different in every place. If the concept that is given a concept is time, then the entire void is now chaotic. So, it can only be limited to a state in a small place. This state is night. If it's more detailed, maybe it's darkness. Chaos breeds in the lightless zone. Hui listened and narrowed his eyes as he speculated. It sounds like a completely reasonable guess. Could it be that even in a completely lightless state, there will still be that? In the end, what does chaos runs amok mean? Literally, could it be that once there was a lightless zone, there would be soldiers of chaos? No, the scope was too wide. Even under normal circumstances, there would always be a side of the planet without a sun. So it had to be a condition like extreme darkness where life was, and boom, Hui slammed his head against the wall and pressed himself against it. I don't understand. What is that chaos concept body doing? Why does it feel like there are problems everywhere in this void? Yin Nuoxing casually found a place to sit down in the guest room. Every time we go to other people's worlds, which one of them doesn't come in and fumble about in confusion? Do you want to figure out other people's problems in one go? The distant void and the heavy weight accumulated by time have divided us into different worlds. If you want to get involved in other people's stories, you won't be able to do it without breaking through the layers of obstacles in front of you. How do you break through? Yin Nuoxing smiled faintly. Of course, you just have to chisel through it. He knew that this fellow was ready to start not following the normal procedure. He could already see the scene of Maple tormenting this void, and it would probably start tonight. While Hui was imagining what would happen at night, and how Maple was going to start his recklessness, the gradually passing time dragged the night before them. Now, the sky was dark, and the whole world was dark. There was no light inside or outside the house. There was no light in this place. The whole world was quiet. It was so quiet that he had to let his soul drift out to hear the faint breathing in the row of houses in front of him. Night has fallen, and all is quiet. We stretched and looked at Maple and the two girls who were also doing something. "What is the girl doing on the second floor?" "Sleeping," Yin said softly. "She fell asleep 20 minutes ago, but she is a little vigilant of the movements in her room. It won't affect us." "That's fine." Hui flung his robe. "Let's go." The light of teleportation illuminated the dark wilderness. A moment later, Yin and the other three appeared. They looked around and looked up at the sky together. There was no moon, and the night was completely silent. There was no sound of insects and no sound of small animals. After falling into the night, everything seemed to be frozen. "Let's hide for a while and leave a breath of life to camouflage outside." Yin thought for a moment. This time, she did not use the origin energy. She used the annihilation energy to condense an order barrier to hide the four of them in the night. Then 2 hours passed. "Are we here to watch a meteor shower?" We was speechless. There was not even a moon in the middle of the night, and there were not many stars in the sky. Should we remove the barrier? Yin also did not know what was going on. After thinking about it, he was about to agree and raise his hand when he suddenly heard a strange sound. His outstretched hand paused. Hui and the two girls immediately held their breaths and focused. The four of them looked up at the sky together. That was the place where the sound came from. A low and strange sound echoed in the silent night. According to cognition, it was a bit like the countless destructive noises in the void, a low and strange sound in the space of the real world. It was also like a very small, continuous thunder, storm, vortex, surge, and many more. Forget it. He could not explain it clearly. It was just a very strange sound. As they waited in anticipation, a pitch-black object deeper than the night appeared in their line of sight, accompanied by an aura that caused their expressions to change slightly. A surging gray cloud appeared out of thin air and moved forward with the footsteps of the night. The low annihilation energy continued to spread throughout the entire space, sprinkling the night with the aura of annihilation of all things. Chapter 18:10. The night was dark and devoid of light. Without the illumination of the moon, the stars were sparse as well. The entire wilderness was pure black as ink. However, in this extremely dark place, there was an even deeper darkness appearing out of nowhere. It carried with it a gloomy aura that would cause even the darkness of nature to retreat. It was as if a monster without intelligence was wandering in the wilderness. When that aura that could crush all things in the world into pieces was released, it made the night even more restless, as if something was moving restlessly. Annihilation energy. There was no mistaking it. It was definitely annihilation energy. However, compared to the annihilation energy of the chaotic concept body, it was much lower in level. For example, most of the Empyrean gods, and primeval gods, ordinary or extraordinary energies were compared to the origin energy. Obviously, their energies were not as advanced as the origin energy. Even Sui Feng and the other inheritors claimed that although they were inheritors, they had only inherited the origin energy. They were only given this title to make it easier for others to identify them. Their level of control and understanding of the origin energy was not enough to qualify as inheritors. Only a few inheritors were recognized by the Empyrean gods of origin. Therefore, the level of annihilation energy of this gloomy dark blob should be about the ordinary level, which was the level that most of the Empyrean gods of origin and primeval gods controlled. It was very different from the chaotic concept body. The ordinary level of annihilation energy should be something that was split off from the chaotic concept body, right? Hui muttered to himself as he looked at Maple. Although it was dark, it was not enough to stop them. Yin nodded. The level of this energy is higher than the level of the chaos soldiers we saw today. It corresponds to the level of the Empyrean gods of origin, but it is still very far from the level of the Empyrean gods of origin. Is it here because of the aura of life? Feng Qingwang asked in a low voice. Should we try throwing out another aura of life to see if it will attract a second one? That's doable. Throw it further away. Feng Qing Wang lightly nodded her chin, her jade-like hands clasped together in front of her, condensing a pinkish-red energy ball that was only the size of a thumb. She flicked her finger, and the pinkish-red energy ball was flung out of the barrier about 1,000 meters away. Yin Nuoxing and the others held their breaths and stared at the sky. However, the second dark cloud didn't appear. Instead, the cloud that was moving forward suddenly turned around and floated toward the crimson-pink flame that suddenly appeared in the night sky. The strange sound it made when it moved made Siyu feel very uncomfortable. She couldn't help but scratch her ear. The dark cloud swallowed the life force that Feng Qing Wang threw into its stomach. It stayed there for a while and then turned around. It kept moving forward. Hui looked at the direction where it was moving. If it was moving in a straight line, it would reach the village, the city they just left. His aura has been devoured. He only lasted for 5 seconds. Feng Qing Wang whispered. The life aura she left behind was very weak. She could feel it being devoured by the annihilation energy. It's moving toward the small city. Siyu hurriedly pulled Yin Nuoxing's arm. There isn't even a single heavenly god of origin here. If we let it enter the city, the consequences would be unimaginable. Let's take it down now. Yin Nuoxing's response was very quick. She raised her hand, and a spell formation appeared. Just as she was about to cast a disintegration spell on the dark cloud's face, Hui hurriedly knocked it on the head with a karate chop. Don't rush. Let's wait. What's wrong? Yin Nuoxing suppressed the energy that was about to explode and looked at Hui, who seemed to be deep in thought. Don't rush to deal with it. I have a few ideas that I want to test. Let's see if it's really going to enter the city, or... Hui said a few ambiguous words. It was like a hint, making Yin Nuoxing also feel that there was a universe inside, so he put away the formation. Then let's take a look first. When its annihilation energy is about to spread into the city, it's not too late to destroy it. The four of them sneakily followed behind the dark cloud. Both of them blended into the night. The dark cloud didn't know that it was being followed by 4 little tails. It was just slowly drifting toward the small city that was 100 or 200 kilometers away. It took them a full 4 hours to reach their destination. If it was summer, the sky would be almost bright. Does this block of ink have a true body? Siyu finally couldn't help but ask. I took a peek and saw through the energy barrier. However, I didn't see anything that could be considered a true body. Well, that's not right. I should say that its true body is a cloud-like thing, just like my annihilation element, Yin Nuoxing said. Siyu thought for a moment and said, "Oh." Then she looked at the dark cloud that was slowly drifting forward. She couldn't help but complain. It seems that things that lean towards the order of chaos are mostly a cloud of air or a cloud of ink, and they're all of the same color. Not only chaos, the energy of order is actually the same as well. Because they are all pure energy, the energy of order is controlled by a group of intelligent life forms, so it will change according to the individual's habits and preferences. However, the main body is still energy. The only thing that changes is its appearance. As for chaos, it is a pity that they don't have any brains, so they can only use the purest form of energy. As for the color that you are concerned about, the energy of order that leans towards chaos is basically gray or black in color. According to those darn things that play hide and seek, this is because the chaos void itself is gray and dull, so anything that is born with this as the foundation would naturally be gray and black in color. Even if there is a slight difference, it would at most be 2 or 3 different colors. As for the energy of order, because the world of order has brilliant colors, the energy of order has countless different colors. When the battle in the world of order starts, it would look like fireworks that fill the sky. Fireworks that fill the sky. So you thought back to the time when they were fighting in the front line of the void. She agreed with this, saying, especially when they were fighting in the dark void and poured all kinds of energy on the various types of the abyss death mist. The sound of fireworks blooming was not small at all. Fireworks were being released into the void all the time. It looked very festive, as if there was a festival every day. The dark cloud floated for a full 5 hours and finally reached the edge of the small city. When it was about 100 feet away, it suddenly stopped. It hung in midair and released the annihilation energy in all directions. It didn't do anything else but just hung in midair. It stopped. Hui also kept the energy that he was prepared to shoot it down. After thinking for a while, he turned to Feng Qing Wang and said, "Little Phoenix, throw a ball of energy out to test it." Feng Qing Wang made an O sound and raised her hand to gather a ball of energy. She aimed at. After thinking for a while, she threw it towards the place near the broken city wall. In the pure black night sky, the light and the fresh breath of life instantly attracted the attention of the cloud of chaos. We could almost see the cloud of chaos lunging out like a hungry beast, who knew that it was actually circling around the place, as if it was hesitating. That's right, circling around. It was very human-like, circling around the same place in a counterclockwise direction. After a while, it would move forward to test the waters and then immediately retreat back, as if it was afraid to cross the distance of 100 feet. Even if a very delicious energy of order appeared in the night, it would not rush forward immediately. There's a weak thought. Yin Nuoxing had been staring at the movement of the cloud of chaos. From the blurry body of the cloud of chaos, she read a little bit of thought. The very blurry thought was that it was wondering if it should go over and pick up the energy. Out of the instinct of chaos and order, it wanted to go over and destroy it. But there was some kind of, it seemed to be a thought that could be called experience, which affected it and made it not dare to take another step forward. It seemed that it was also these two thoughts that made it come here, but it stood far away and did not dare to enter the city. Thought. Hui was stunned. Isn't that just a simple creation of chaos? Well, the soldiers of chaos have a little bit of order, even more so than the abyssal death mist. They are directly controlled by the concept of chaos. They are born according to their will, and they also act according to their thoughts. If you want to think about it, the soldiers of chaos and the creatures of chaos are actually inhabitants of the void of chaos. So having a little bit of thought is actually not something that is incomprehensible. Yin Nuoxing stroked her long hair and said, "It's just that it's a little difficult to understand because it is really just a simple energy. The essence of the structure is a little simpler than the soldiers of chaos." When the energy left by Feng Qing Wang dissipated, it also quieted down and squatted 100 feet away from the city gate. It did not move forward nor retreat. Shoot it down. It looks like it can't move, as if its thought is stuck. Hui waved his hand. Yin Nuoxing raised the disintegrating formation of order. Just as he was about to release an energy shock wave to scatter the ashes, the chaotic cloud suddenly trembled slightly. Then, with a speed that was 10 to 20 times faster than when it came here, it flew into the darkness behind it. The sudden movement stunned the four of them, and they did not react for a while. Let's follow it and see. It looks like it's having a stroke. Hui smiled bitterly. Why did the marshmallow suddenly have a stroke? The marshmallow and the others chased after each other. In just a few minutes, they had returned to the field where the marshmallow had first appeared. Just as they chased after the marshmallow, before they could do anything, the marshmallow began to shiver all over. It was as if it was about to freeze to death in the winter wind. Soon, it disintegrated and disappeared into thin air, just like when it first appeared. And as the chaos cloud dissipated, the traces of the annihilation energy that flowed here also disappeared. The entire world returned to its extremely dark and deep state. Only the things that they saw just now were missing. It was as if nothing had happened. We scratched his head. Is it over? Feng, where did that cloud of energy go? Is it invisible or has it dissipated? Using the origin energy to scan the entire wilderness covered by the night, Yin Nuoxing's slightly narrowed eyes, as if he was dozing off, turned into a pair of eyes that were releasing a dazzling luster. His eyeballs looked like two suns, and after a moment, the light in his eyes dimmed, and he shrugged. It's gone. It's completely gone. When it dissipated a minute ago, there were still traces of energy left. Now, even its shadow can't be found. Yin Nuashing frowned as he spoke. He did not give up and used the origin energy to scan again. The result was the same. Indeed, even its shadow can't be found. It's so clean that it's as if it never came out. Hui scratched his head and said to Feng Qing Wang, "Little Phoenix, go." Feng Qing Wang nodded. She snapped her fingers and threw out a red light. The four of them squatted on the ground and waited quietly. Boom! 5 minutes later, the earth suddenly wriggled, and a huge gray fist that was over 1,000 feet in size jumped out from the ground. It crushed the ball of light, and then slowly retracted back into the earth. It even used its hand to flatten the ground a few times. Well, this action looked like it was covering itself with a quilt. It had flattened the quilt itself. Hui rubbed his chin and threw out a cloud of energy. Yin Nuashing looked at his holy energy and couldn't help but ask, "Are you fishing here?" They waited for another 5 minutes. This time, there was no reaction at all. Hui looked at it and clapped his hands. He threw out another cloud of energy. Then, he asked Feng Qing Wang and Siyu to throw out another cloud of energy. This time, when the time came to 8 minutes, the entire field shook violently. Boom! There was another violent tremor that broke through the earth, and a mountain peak that was tens of thousands of feet tall rose from the ground. A sharp hand grabbed the large pile of energy that they had thrown out and rushed into the sky, ruthlessly crushing it, causing a burst of bright light to explode in the night. Yin Nuashing felt that the people in the small city would probably be awakened by this earth-shaking movement. The sharp hand did not stop there after crushing the energy. It suddenly slammed down on the ground, causing the ground to rise and fall like noodles. The mountains in the distance cracked open as hundreds of cracks appeared randomly. Annihilation energy comparable to the pinnacle of origin gushed out like a fountain, polluting the entire sky. Well, I think it's venting. We couldn't help but laugh. Obviously, it's angry when it woke up. Yin Nuashing crossed his arms and nodded. Anyone who was woken up twice in less than 20 minutes would be like this. No, some people might be more serious. For example, for himself. After the gigantic hand with annihilation energy was done messing around, it clenched its fist and slowly retracted back into the ground. Just when Yin Nuo and the others thought that this fellow was done messing around and was not going to clean up, it appeared again and covered itself with soil. Finally, the ground regained its tranquility. Other than the mountain in the distance that was affected and could not be restored, the ground in front of them did not change much. You look handsome when you're venting, but you look really embarrassed when you clean up after venting. We didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head and said, "It's like you kicked off the blanket when you were in bed." After a while, you couldn't stand the cold and had to pick up the blanket from the ground. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. We poked his cheek and said, "Feng, do you see anything?" I see something. For example." He yawned and pointed at his feet. For example, the energy of chaos came from under our feet. When the huge hand came out, the whole ground changed from the normal color of order to gray and black. What do you think that means? You're not going to say that the people on this planet are actually living on top of a volcano, are you? Oh, it's not that serious. Yin Nuashing scratched his head. Hui and the two girls were relieved when they heard that. It's just that everyone in this void region is living on top of a volcano, and the volcano under there, but is an active volcano that can erupt at any time. The three of them said, "Isn't that even more serious?" They had lived for tens of billions of years and a few eras. Every time they looked out of the window, they would see the mountains in the distance like a rock barrier, like layers of curtains wrapping around them. Their city was located in the center of a basin. For generations, they had lived far away from the mortal world. In their eyes, there were only flat mountains and distant mountain barriers. It was summer all year round, and the ground was warm enough. But one day, the truth told everyone that there was actually a volcano under their butts, and there was boiling magma millions of miles away. It was hard to say when the magma would rush up and overturn them. Although I don't know what you're thinking, it shouldn't be like that. Yin Nuashing saw Huey's gloomy face and lowered his head as he muttered. He patted his shoulder and squatted down to dig a handful of soil on the ground. He looked at it for a moment and crushed it. Do you still remember what I said in the room? The night was given some kind of concept, so chaos was born. No, it should be called awakening chaos. Oh, I remember. What did you find? Hui snapped out of his trance. Given a concept, Yin Nuashing said. He looked at the ground, and the power of origin was surging in his eyes. Then he frowned again. It's just a guess. There's no way to prove it, because I can't see any traces of transformation. Just like what I said just now, the night was given a concept, and chaos was born. It would only happen when the specific conditions are met. And then the Earth. Well, the existence of this planet itself should be made of chaos energy. We squatted down and pinched a handful of soil. He looked at it for a moment. It's just ordinary soil. There's nothing special about it. Even the energy content is not very high. This is what it looks like before transformation. It's the state before the conditions are met. Feng Qing Wang seemed to understand what he meant. You mean it's actually not the night that was given a concept, but something made of chaos energy? When the conditions are met, they will turn back into chaos soldiers and creatures made of chaos energy. And the conditions here are night, darkness, and the energy of order, something like that. Maybe there are more conditions. Yin Nuashing shook his head. It should be a very specific condition. It's so specific that it won't be triggered if there's one less condition. If there's one less condition, there'll just be cold sand, soil, and mountains. But when all the conditions are met, they'll return to their original form and run amok in the stars. The life that depends on them will also collapse in an instant. So, when we tested it with the power of order, they were transformed because the conditions were met. Hui was sweating. Part of the conditions were met. It should be just part of it. Their instincts made them subconsciously destroy everything related to order. So, they barely met the conditions. They reached out and swept the dust off the pillow. It's not the time to meet all the conditions yet. So, they didn't turn into chaos soldiers directly. So, they didn't fight here immediately. Yin Nuashing shook her head and added, I don't know if it's the quantity of the power of order or something else. I don't dare to throw out a ball of origin energy. If it woke up, it would be a small matter. But the life on this planet would be in trouble. Hui smiled bitterly. It was obvious from the way chaos and order were at odds with each other. If Maple were to throw out a cluster of origin energy, there would be a riot of demons, the void, and billions of worlds. Oh, that would be too exaggerated. Anyway, there would definitely be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clusters of annihilation energy, followed by a scene where millions of chaos soldiers would unite and attack them. Hiss! Hui pinched his chest and gasped when he thought of that scene. That's a little exciting. According to what Maple said, perhaps in this world of light. No, perhaps in the entire void, where there was a world of light, everything that existed in the world of light was actually chaos energy. Yes, this was the domain of the chaos concept body after all. There should be endless annihilation energy and endless chaos soldiers. He was wondering how the little things he saw when he came in were the representatives of the chaos concept body. It seemed that they were just dandruff-level power. Hui shuddered again when he thought of that. If that's the case, wouldn't all the order life in this domain be very dangerous? As I said, a city sitting in the crater of an active volcano is like a castle made of sand. It would only take a moment to be destroyed. Yin Nuashing held a ball of light in her right hand and slowly raised it. Then she crushed it. The broken light turned into fragments and scattered through her fingers, making the 3 of them feel a chill on their backs. But that's just my own guess. After all, this is only the lower plane. Although she thinks that we are from the upper plane and that we should know that sentence, I also think that the situation in the upper plane is the same. As for whether it is the same or not, I'm not particularly sure. I just think that the probability is very high. Hui scratched his head. Should we ask for help? Yin Nuashing tilted her head and thought for a moment. In the end, she spread her hands. Is it hard to say? Why do you use a question to answer a question? Because I don't know what's going on in other people's houses. Yin Nuashing continued to spread her hands. We're just here to clean up. God knows if other people's houses are hiding some special things other than filth. For example, contraband, or inflammable and explosive things, or broken things that can explode at any time. For example, there are many more. Just as he finished speaking, his face twitched. He saw that Siyu had a flash of inspiration and was about to speak, so he hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth. Then, a sentence exploded in his soul. Transmission. Void cleaner. Yin nuashing and hui. No, this girl can really, with this shout, it's over. Now, even if they wanted to think about the void frontline, it would mean something else. It wasn't the first time she used this title, but this time, the destructive power was especially great. It was at the level of a void earthquake. Siyu stuck out her tongue. Little star, you said cleaning yourself. If you didn't mention it, I wouldn't have thought of this. Yin nuashing. You asked for it. Chapter 1811. There were many mystical things in this world. Most of them had never been seen before. Even if they were of the same type, before the moment of recognition arrived, they would still be considered as having never experienced it before. Even though many things were similar in nature and could be categorized into the same type, they could be explained using the same cognitive method and then refurbish their understanding. Everything in the world, big or small, was similar in the void. What they experienced today might happen again in a few days, or they might see it happen again. It was normal, very normal. It was nothing more than the different conditions when it happened. The location was different. The main characters were different. The bystanders were different. The heavy things were different, or there were many. Even if everything in the world was categorized, there are not many types, but because of the many conditions that happened at the moment, it became more and more complicated. For example, they were looking at a chaos soldier that had somehow turned into a huge rock under their buttocks. They had many ideas to try to explain it, but they did not know which was the truth. Their knowledge was too broad, and they knew too much. Of course, there were also many things that they did not know, so it was difficult to determine which was the truth. Even so, it is still possible to make a rough judgment. Listening to Huey's nagging, Yin Nuashing glanced at him, then turned to look at the black land in front of her. She stretched out her hand, and a colorful luster appeared. She pointed it forward. Don't. Girls, stop her. We was so scared that his tongue was stuck out. Siyu and Qing Huang immediately rushed forward. One hugged Yin Nuashing from the front, while the other grabbed her arm from the back. Hui rushed forward and slapped away the origin energy that Maple had almost released. He was sweating profusely. Damn it, you already know that there is a huge chaos derivative under your buttocks. What are you planning to do with the origin energy? Do you think that the people on this planet are not dying fast enough? Yin Nuashing was stunned. 2 seconds later, she calmly said, I forgot. The three of them were speechless. Was she distracted? TSK, I'm just rambling. Aren't there just a few situations when encountering matters related to chaos? We're not in a hurry, are we? Hui wiped the sweat off his brow and waved his hand. Anyway, if we follow this trail, we will know the cause and effect sooner or later. Is there a problem with this domain, the concept body of chaos? Or is there a problem with the life of order itself? Or is there some other strange problem, such as the origin of the world or something? Or is there a problem with both sides of this place? I've been thinking that neither side is normal in the battle between order and chaos. Chaos itself is abnormal, and order and chaos have been at odds for so long. As a normal, intelligent life form, they would not be normal for long, even if they were to spar with the playthings of the chaotic void. Look at us, we've been fighting on the front lines for 5 years. Ask yourself, how many normal people are left on the front lines? Yin Nuashing thought for a moment. There are many normal people in the frontline world. Isn't that? Forget it. Don't you know it very well? Hui rolled his eyes. The biggest difference between order and chaos was that the beings of order mostly had emotions, rationality, wisdom, sensibility, and complexity. On the other hand, the beings of the chaotic void, to put it bluntly, all of them had cerebral palsy. Their minds were filled with destruction, slaughter, destruction, getting rid of order, flattening order, and overturning the chaotic void. Those bastards probably did not talk about anything else in their free time. How could they be normal? Well, if that was the case, there were not many normal people in the heavenly god of origin either. After all, they had been at odds with the chaotic void for 366 years. If it was Hui, he might have gone mad too. If it was Maple, he might have gone mad from the inside out. Probably not even the heavenly god of origin could hold him down. What about now? Hurriedly putting aside the bad thoughts that were growing wildly in his mind, Hui coughed dryly and squinted at Maple. We can't do anything about these weird things for now. So, shall we go back first? Tomorrow, we'll look for that little girl and that whatever hung. If you ask, they'll tell you. Yin Nuashing tilted her head and glanced at him. Don't tell me you've forgotten how they treat people from the upper plane. Besides, they might not even know about this. We've been told since we were young. It's like a custom that makes everyone subconsciously refrain from doing this because it's a fatal thing that can lead to a disaster. Just like what Siyu said, it's words that adults use to deceive children. They'll abide by it. It's a habit that they've always abided by. Don't you think it's weird that we're asking about this custom? At most, we'll just expose our identities and tell them that we're from another void or something. Do you think they'll believe that? This. We scratched his head. It was really hard to say. What other void? Even if they knew that the void itself was infinite, they probably wouldn't be interested in visitors from another void or anything. Moreover, since they could tell that they were from the upper plane at a glance, it was obvious that the upper, middle, and lower planes in this strange void were also divided according to normal rules and concepts. The upper plane that I know is not the upper plane that you know. This kind of thing doesn't seem to be particularly easy to say. We scratched his head. Yin Nuashing nodded slightly. It was always hard to shake the perception of others. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many self-righteous people in the world. Well, it's not very good to say this. There are many situations. Not everyone doesn't listen to others, unless their temperament is very extreme or their attitude is not particularly good. Coincidentally, they met a group of people whose first impression of them was reduced by 100% and who were not particularly friendly to them. Whatever they said, they would probably only be half believed, or maybe 1/3, or even completely treat them as farts. He didn't really want to deal with this kind of thing. Looking at Maple's reluctant expression, he knew that he didn't want to deal with this kind of thing. He thought about it. Generally speaking, Maple would probably beat up those who didn't listen to him. The extent of the beating depended on the other party's attitude. It should be fine for now, just that their attitude was unfriendly, but not to the extent that they didn't listen to him. Anyway, let's go back first. We'll talk about it tomorrow when the sun rises. There's nothing we can do now that we're holed up in this wilderness. Don't throw the origin energy out. If you really want to give it a try, we'll find an uninhabited planet for you to slowly test it out. Yin Nuashing shrugged. The group slowly walked back to the small town and village in the dark. The night was still quite long, and there was no moonlight. They could only use their senses to feel the sun on the other side to judge the time. This planet should have about 40 hours of day and night, and the nighttime was even longer, about 20 hours. At first, it didn't sound like much, but to put another way, according to the ratio of time in the realm of the gods, there were 14 hours of 24 hours in a day, and it was strictly for everyone. If one looked down from a night sky during these 14 hours, one would probably only see an abandoned continent. There would be traces of tens of thousands of lives and traces of construction all over the world, but not a single person could be seen. Putting it this way, it felt different. It was like a haunted place. After all, to some people's understanding, the night was the beginning of life. Well, at first they were grounded. If they wanted to have fun, they could only do it in their own homes. Isn't it a little too quiet? Hui and the others had just returned to the outside of the broken city wall and looked inside the city gate, but, well, there was no sound or movement at all. The commotion we made in the wilderness should have been quite big, right? The mountains have collapsed. If it was an earthquake, it should have been very big. Why is there no sound at all here? There are faint thoughts, but not much. Most people are still in a state of sleep and have not been awakened by the commotion just now. Yin Nuashing narrowed her eyes slightly. I'll try to make a little noise. Make a noise? Hui was stunned for a moment. When he turned his head, he saw Maple raising his right foot. His heart suddenly thumped. He reached out his hand and shouted in horror, "Mercy!" Asterisk boom. Asterisk, it was a violent tremor that was enough to make the entire planet tremble. Hundreds of small cracks appeared on the ground, and a small pit sank. Maple had suppressed the destructive force and only made an impact. It was just shaking the pot and did not blow up the kitchen. But it was enough to make Hui break out in cold sweat. He had begun to be vigilant of the movement of the night, hoping that the soldiers of chaos would not be awakened by the kick. There was only one round of violent tremor, and it soon spread out 4 to 5,000 miles. Conservatively speaking, the entire area covered by the night was affected. Then, the night was still quiet. We thought that hundreds of strong men would wake up in the house and shout out the window, "Which bastard is beating gongs and drums here instead of sleeping at night? Do you want to die?" However, there was no sound at all. The people who should be sleeping were still sleeping, snoring, grinding their teeth, and muttering. "That's strange." Hui scratched his head. "It's a little strange. With such a level of movement, even if it's just a round of impact on the surface, it's not to the extent that it can't wake a person up. If there's such a movement in the realm of the gods, half of the people in a large city will be awakened." Yin Nuashing said and raised her finger. "That's why the Great Barrier of the city has to be soundproof. It's normal to suddenly fight outside." "Oh, that's true. I'm talking about the other strange thing." Hui crossed his arms and muttered. Yin Nuashing and the other two turned their heads curiously to see what he had noticed. "It's the middle of the night. Why isn't there a specific bed-shaking exercise?" The three of them, Yin Nuashing, "See you, Qing Huang. Let's throw him into the void of chaos." "Hey, don't. Hui laughed dryly and quickly waved his hand. "It's just a joke. Don't get excited. The two girls are here. Control yourself." Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes at him. "What are you thinking in your head every day?" "I'm thinking about some things that should be done in the human world. What else can I be thinking about? Look at this place, it's so quiet. There's no movement at all. If they don't make babies in the middle of the night, are they going to make babies in the day?" Ahem. I'm definitely not making a joke. I'm just talking about this kind of thing in a very normal way. Let's look at it from a normal perspective. Ahem. Haven't you noticed that all activities related to the night have stopped? It's as if we've returned to the era when light couldn't illuminate the night. We put on a very serious expression and said to Maple and the others seriously, "Moreover, it's quite uniform. There's no exception, no matter if it's a normal life form or a higher life form." Yin Nuashing glanced at him, turned his head, and looked across the dilapidated city wall at the entire village. Everyone was sleeping at the same time, and even breathing at the same time. Yes, breathing at the same time. Men, women, old, and young were all in the same state. Moreover, the breathing rate of the people who snored was the same as the breathing rate of the people who didn't snore. It was not normal for them to breathe at the same time while talking in their sleep. Everyone's physique was different, so their breathing rate was naturally different as well. Even if there was a coincidence, it would not be 100%. However, the situation in front of him, it was as if there was only one life in the entire city, and only one life could coordinate to such a degree. But one life form could not do it. One of them was snoring, one of them was talking in his sleep, one of them was grinding his teeth, and the rest of them were sleeping normally. He felt that if he was really thinking about this problem, his brain must be abnormal. This place is really wrong from the beginning to the end. Whether it's chaos or order, it's all wrong. Yin Nuashing's cheeks twitched. "I can't even explain this. How am I going to explain it? How am I going to explain it?" If you want to explain it, you can. We seem to have seen a similar situation before, but it's not a human." Hui tilted his head and spread his hands. "Seen it before?" Yin Nuashing frowned and thought carefully for a moment. Then she said, "Ah, you're talking about the orc race. The life forms of the entire race were born from the same place. Moreover, each individual has a more efficient total assimilation than Soul Link. If the entire race only does the same thing, they will be completely unified. That race, what is it again? I forgot. It's been almost 10 eras. How can I remember it so clearly? Hui shook his head. At that time, I just thought that the characteristic of their connection was quite interesting, so I paid more attention to it. Yin tilted her head and looked into the city. She knew what we meant. However, the life forms of order in front of her should not have reached such a state. The entire orc race was unified. Their body length, appearance, and even the specific number of hairs were all the same. They were basically replicated from the same place. On the other hand, the life forms of order in front of her were obviously different. However, they inexplicably maintained a common action. I feel that if I continue to think about this matter, I might become very strange. We heard that and scratched his head. Then let's let the other little friends see the situation. I Ching, what's the situation on your side? Ah, Lord Hui, I haven't found anything yet. I Ching quickly steadied his voice and looked down at the planet under the blue sky. I'm in the middle plane. The situation in the middle plane is better than the lower plane. I can finally see normal buildings and normal clothes. I feel like I've moved forward by an era. However, I haven't found anything worth paying attention to yet. Ah, that's right. According to what you said, the lower plane was destroyed by people from the upper plane. The middle plane may be in a similar situation. I Ching looked up into the void. There is a sense of destruction, but it's not as serious as the lower plane. Furthermore, there are also traces of chaos soldiers in the middle plane. They did not fight in the void, but in the real world. Hui was stunned. What's going on? I haven't investigated the specifics yet, and I don't dare to casually come into contact with the people below, I Ching said with a bitter laugh. Those people are too evil. When they saw that I was from the upper plane, they charged at me without saying a word. A million energy beams came crashing down on me. I couldn't fight back, and they didn't listen to me. They looked like they wanted to eat me alive. I could only run away quickly. Now, I'm still hanging in the sky, invisible. I'm thinking of ways to use my energy clones to get some information or something. Things aren't going well. The 4 people from Yin planet. Good Lord, the sickness of the middle plane was even more serious than the lower plane. In the lower plane, they were only unfriendly and showed some attitude. In the middle plane, they directly attacked without saying a word. How many years of accumulated resentment would it take to reach such a level? Oh, the lower plane could only remain unfriendly, probably because they knew that they could not defeat the people from the upper plane. However, the middle plane was different. A considerable number of them could actually fight against the people from the upper plane as long as the upper plane did not send out their core forces. Even if the people from the upper plane took out their core forces, a group of top forces in the middle plane could still find a way to kill them. For example, the 20 high-level premier who were killed in the underworld. Ah, that was as miserable as it could be. Both sides were miserable. The word miserable was engraved on their faces. Well, it sounds like we're not very lucky. But let's not talk about that first. Did any of you land in the Dark Knight region? Did you find anything? Lord Hui, one of us should have landed in the Dark Knight region of the local planet, as you said, an hour ago. Where is he? I haven't contacted him for an hour. I just checked. He seems to have been hung back to the spiritual temple. Yin and the others were speechless. Oh my God, did something happen? I didn't hear any signal for help. He's gone just like that. We also, I Ching scratched his head. I don't understand. He's gone an hour. He's a beginner premier. Seems like we have to be careful. Pay attention to the time at night. If you have nothing to do, hide yourself completely. You have to make the world believe that you're gone. It could also be darkness. Anyway, don't casually walk into places that are completely dark. Be careful. Hui said as he threw the information that he had just compiled to everyone. There's a special concept and rule in the Void region that will make the soldiers of chaos swarm here. Remember not to cause too much trouble when you're looking for clues. By the way, find someone to see what's going on in the place that unlucky guy explored. Did he disappear with the ball, or did he just disappear? Yes, Lord. Hui wiped the sweat off his forehead, tilted his head, and suddenly slapped Maple on the shoulder. Look, he's gone in the blink of an eye. You were just about to throw a ball of origin energy at that place. Who knows what's going to happen now? Yin Nuashing wiped the sweat off his forehead. He did not expect such a thing to happen. To be able to kill a beginner premier in an instant required a considerable amount of combat power. If he and Hui wanted to do that, they would have to use all their strength to smash him in the face. According to this calculation, either there were mid-level premier soldiers among the Chaos soldiers, or there were hundreds of beginner premier peak premier soldiers ganging up on him. Or the Chaos concept body just happened to come out and smash him flat. In any case, the Void region was not as safe as imagined. After all, it was still the domain of the Chaos concept body. After messing around for a whole night, they received a lot of shocking news. When the four of them returned to the girl's residence, they all let out a long sigh of relief. They felt confused everywhere. When they didn't know anything at first, they were still in a daze. Now that they knew a lot, it was as if they had fallen into the sea. There was water everywhere. Water had entered their brains. Headache. I don't know where to start the investigation. We knocked on his head. At first, he was just looking for traces of the remnants of a world group that had been dormant for 2 eras. He did not expect to run into such a complicated place. Yin Nuashing gave him a glance before looking out of the window, feeling somewhat bored. Well, it wasn't actually boredom, but rather a bit fidgety. The origin energy was a bit restless, making him a bit fidgety, but he didn't dare let them act recklessly. He was still unprepared, and if they really provoked a primal chaos concept body, going all out would only make them return to the spiritual temple without any mishaps. It was a long-lost feeling. It had been 5 eras since he last had this feeling. He did not know whether it was because they were in the domain of the chaos concept body this time, or because there were still some trivial matters related to the origin heavenly god. No matter which one it was, he felt depressed from head to toe. Just as he sighed gloomily in his heart and wanted to talk to the little angel about how to suppress his irritation, a slight energy movement suddenly came from the second floor. The four of them pricked up their ears and looked at each other at the same time. Hui carefully pointed up and gestured to the door. Yin Nuashing and Siyu nodded. The four of them carefully concealed themselves and moved in the direction of the second floor. The area of the second floor was about the same as the first floor. There was a study, a bedroom, an attic, and a legendary locked room on the second floor. It looked very curious. Well, it seemed that higher life forms were indeed higher life forms. No matter how strange it was, their houses would still be bigger than the houses of ordinary life forms. This was probably the consensus engraved in the souls of higher life forms. The weak energy movement did not come from the bedroom, but from a place next to it. It sounded like the sound of energy explosion. They were still monitoring the movement at the moment. The girl was still sleeping, so the energy explosion did not affect her. Where did the sound come from? The second floor. Siyu gestured and pointed at the innermost corner. The corner. Hui was stunned for a moment. He looked at the innermost locked room, then looked at the bedroom. He left a trace of energy for vigilance and walked to the innermost corner together. Let's go and take a look. It was an ordinary door, but there were traces of an energy seal on the door. They could clearly feel the existence of the seal when they got closer. Hui waved his hand in front of the door. Phone. Remember the form of the energy seal. Yes, open it. Yin Nuashing nodded and opened a layer of energy seal to isolate the movement. Hui responded with an "oh." Without another word, he slapped the door and the door frame down. Yin Nuashing, I asked you to open the seal, not to smash other people's doors. I didn't expect it to be so weak. Hui laughed dryly and put the door frame aside. He stuck his head out to look inside and then exclaimed, Wow, this is interesting. Oh, it is indeed interesting. Yin Nuashing nodded. It's like a remnant of a good wish that can't be exposed and can only be carefully hidden. Chapter 1812. Everyone had the experience of secretly hiding things that they liked but were not convenient for others to see. They tried their best to hide things as if they were playing tactics with their family. Except for digging a tunnel in the house, they could basically hide things anywhere. Even if the house was a mansion, they could ignore the fact that they could dig a tunnel. However, Even if they put it in the courtyard, they would probably get up in the middle of the night to take a look at it. Other than that, the alternative places were under the bed, under the vase, under the pillow, put it in the corner, and mixed it up with other miscellaneous things. Or like here, although it was not hidden in the attic, the mysterious locked room in the corner of the second floor was a master of hiding things. Basically, there was some kind of secret hidden in this kind of room. Well, it was just hiding things, and this place was no exception. It was just that the things hidden were not normal. It was a primeval jungle, the kind of dense forest that had grown for many years without any significant damage or disturbance. Layers upon layers of treetops covered the sky very tightly. If one wanted to see a ray of sunlight, one could only see tiny spots of light that fell to the ground through the gaps between the leaves with difficulty. "This place is hidden in a forest," Siyu whispered. As she spoke, she turned back to look in the direction of the bedroom behind her. The girl was still sleeping soundly, and she had no idea that the things she had painstakingly hidden had been opened by them. Hiding a forest was actually not a big deal. After all, it was a higher life form, and its control of space, rules, and concepts was relatively firm. It was not difficult for it to create a planet or a world of light, so it was not too surprising that this locked room in the corner hid an alternative space. What really surprised them was just like what Maple said. It was just like a small, unfinished wish that was carefully hidden away. 80% of the planet they were on, including the ocean, if that small pool could be considered an ocean, was not covered by green plants. Most of the land was yellow sand and rocks facing the sky. So a primitive forest suddenly popping up in this small room was a little thought-provoking. They had said before that the cognition of the people living here was not affected. Although they did not know why they lived in such poverty, this was the result of their own search. Their cognition and wisdom were not affected at all. As long as they were willing, a group of higher life forms could easily completely reshape this star system into a more suitable place for human habitation. By then, there would be cities, mountains, rivers, glaciers, forests, and a variety of environments everywhere. It was the same for human settlements. Then a primitive forest popped up in front of them. This was the most thought-provoking thing of all. "Maple, what's the situation of this space? Is it connected to the real world?" "Hold on." Yin Nuashing narrowed his eyes as the radiance of origin energy surged. His divine soul spread rapidly, using all things as a bridge to rapidly step over them and expand to a more distant place. Then his slender brow twitched. "This is a complete world, not a small space. The place this door connects to, I've discovered the existence of a planetary system, the void. The void that leads to the deeper void is hidden in the deeper void. However, it is unilaterally shielded from the void, which is why this space could not be found in the void and could only be discovered through the door. It has considerable shielding, and the creator of this world would sense it if we recklessly touch it. Still, we can generally confirm that this is a world light. As for the karmic connection with the door, we don't know yet. There is no telling if it was the door that opened the world light, that this was where everything began and where the world light began, or if the door was just a passage to the world light. Let's see how much the world light is connected to the real world we are in." Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes at him. "You can't do it yourself. As you can see, the degree of overlap is less than 10%. It can be confirmed that it was not copied using the space of the present world as a template. It is a re-evolved world of light. The remaining 10% of overlap should be a connection between the two worlds." Feng Qing Huang was enlightened. "Just like the passage to the created dreamscape." "That's right. There are dozens of passages in this space that lead to the world light ahead. It's easy to check from the inside, but it's hard to find a world light hidden here from the outside. Furthermore, there are a considerable number of lives inside, at least 10,000 times more than the world light outside. It's barely the life content of a normal world light." He crossed his arms. "That's even more interesting. Is there any special meaning in deliberately developing another world's light, orbs in another space? It's a cover-up," Yin Nuashing said subconsciously. She looked back at the quiet bedroom, and then turned back to look at the primitive forest in front of her. It's easy to think of it. It's hidden in an inconspicuous corner, something that can't be seen by others. Once it's discovered, perhaps something not very good will happen, something that's not very good for them. A threat from the upper plane? We made an O sound and seemed to understand something. This was obviously a method of hiding from people, from intelligent beings. It definitely had nothing to do with the soldiers of chaos. If they wanted to hide from the soldiers of chaos, they could have sunk the entire world of light into the depths of the void, leaving only the connection between each other's souls. Using souls as a passageway. We're using large-scale rule power to create a small passageway to cross the world of light in the void. That would be the only passageway. But now they placed it outside and carefully hid it. The target they were hiding from was definitely not the soldiers of chaos. They did not have the time to play hide-and-seek with anyone. If they pushed them here, they would only devour the void where order once existed. I don't know. Yin Nuoxing shook her head gently. Her eyes swept back and forth between the world and the bedroom. What do you say? Let's go in and see what's going on. Or should we reinstall the seal and pretend that this never happened? We thought for a moment and smirked. Or we can just lay our cards on the table. That's not necessary. If you want to adjust the relationship to hostile and destroy this place, I can do it now and give them all a quick death in 3 seconds. Yin Nuoxing squinted his eyes and looked at Xiang Hui as if he was looking at an idiot. Hui grinned. Actually, there were some things that they could almost deduce with their knowledge in this place. The reason why they did not make a more direct judgment was that they were still thinking about other possibilities. How long before dawn? Well, less than 10 hours. That's fine. Hui nodded. He looked back out of the window and threw an energy rune into the void. Then he turned around and pushed Maple and Siyu into the room. He grabbed the door and turned it around to put on the door. Let's go in and see. After the door was closed, Yin Nuoxing engraved the same energy seal inside and let it go to the outside. After the door was closed, the 2-meter-high and 1-meter-wide door frame that was pulled open out of thin air also disappeared. She then turned around and walked in with Hui and the 2 girls. They walked into the primitive jungle. There were dead branches and leaves everywhere. The air was humid and fresh. There were traces of life activities. However, they could not see any of them. After Feng Qing Wang came in, all the animals within 100 miles ran away as if they had smelled their ancestors' scent. My gaze pierced through the countless tree crowns that blocked out the sun and looked up at the sky. The sky here was a rather strange orange-red color. It wasn't an astronomical phenomenon caused by the setting sun. It was a man-made astronomical phenomenon. Although the light didn't seem very pleasing, it was quite welcomed by all living beings. This artificial sunlight was even more nutritious. At any rate, it was good for all living beings, no matter what kind of living being it was. We took the lead to run around in the forest, running under a group of towering ancient trees, bringing the sound of leaves rustling. At first, Yin Nuoxing thought that he was going to take advantage of these 10 hours to go to the place where people live to find out the situation. But after running for a while, he found that he was running towards the deepest part of the primeval forest. Looking at his excited look, he should have seen something that made him feel interesting. Someone left a trace. At a certain moment, Feng Qing Wang pulled Yin Nuoxing's arm and pointed ahead. They looked into the distance and saw a wide wooden bridge that crossed a small river. There was a sign by the bridge that read, "No trespassers allowed," in the common language of all races. What did you see? Yin Nuoxing asked Hui, who was walking in front. It was rare to see this guy so excited. Guess. Hui turned around and showed a bright smile. It made Yin Nuoxing want to print a shoe horn on his handsome face. Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes and threw his sight into the space behind the river. After a few rounds, he simply gave up. The place was too big, and there were life auras everywhere. It was easy to find life auras, but he did not know what Hui had found, so it was possible that he had found it, but there was no way to recognize it. Hui took them quickly across the river and came to the woodland behind. The woodland behind them suddenly changed. There was a relatively flat road in the forest. The surrounding forest also had obvious traces of man-made adjustment. They could clearly use their divine soul to explore. The forest area was divided into 4 or 5 man-made areas that were more than 100 miles in length and width. There was a weak flow of energy in the space of the entire area. It was repulsive energy. Living beings that came close to this kind of energy would basically turn around and leave when they encountered this kind of energy. If they wanted to come in, they would have to withstand the power of this energy to continue moving forward. However, for the 4 of them, this bit of energy was not enough to stop them. This forest area seems to be surrounded by this river. Feng Qing Wang withdrew her eyes from the distance. It looks like an isolated island. Ah, there are buildings in front. Yes, there were buildings. He did see them. In this forest area, in the distance of this long, flat road, there was a relatively wide, open space in the forest. It was still in the forest that covered the sky. There were 20 to 30 houses scattered in the open space. The style of all the buildings was different from the simple huts built with wood, stone, and mud. These angular, well-built, and well-decorated buildings were what they felt could be called buildings, not huts. The buildings in the forest were all made of wooden planks. They were squarish and tall, like sentry towers. There were windows all the way from the bottom to the top, and the top of the tower was a relatively open space. There was also a ball of energy wrapped in an energy barrier. No, this should really be a sentry tower, but looking inside from the open door at the bottom, he could clearly see the furniture, beds, and coffee tables. It was probably a 2-in-1 sentry tower. There was a sentry at the top and a sleeping area at the bottom. The wood of the watchtowers and huts was the same as the wood in the surrounding forest. They were brown with light gray. Judging by the time, they were about the same age. They should have been built with local materials. The inside and outside of the huts were covered with fallen leaves. It was not hard to imagine that there was also a layer of dust. It seemed that no one had been here for a long time. More than 20 watchtowers and 2 spacious buildings of unknown purpose were empty. Broken branches and fallen leaves were scattered everywhere. It seemed that they were going back to the forest. Judging from the scale, it was clear that there were about 50 people stationed here. Not to mention that place, the long path in the forest ahead was also covered with withered branches and withered leaves. No one had taken care of it before. Along the way, one had to worry about whether there would be tree roots sticking out of the ground. If one was not careful, one might trip and fall flat on his face. The things you noticed are these buildings. Yin Nuoxing tilted his head to look at Hui. Hui crossed his arms and winked at him. Take a guess. Yin Nuoxing. Although this guy was always asking for a beating, it was the first time he saw someone asking for a beating to this extent. They walked along the long road in the forest and came to the open space. They could see the situation of the buildings in the forest more clearly. Most of the watchtowers and huts were built next to huge towering trees. It looked like they were tied to the big trees. Small platforms were built with long wooden planks between the trees. Ancient green vines hung down from the trees and wrapped around the handrails of the platforms before continuing to hang down. Unlike the watchtowers, there were only 2 buildings in the open space in the forest. 2 buildings that looked a little like temples. That's right, it was a shrine that high-level life forms loved the most, large. At the very least, compared to those 10-meter-tall sentry towers, this shrine was quite large. It was built from a different material, and its exterior was as smooth as a mirror. Its style was also completely different from those sentry towers. It was impossible not to notice it, even if one wanted to. The buildings in the forest were not in good condition. Just like what they saw just now, they had been empty for many years. They had not been assimilated and swallowed by the forest because they still had energy left behind and were in an indestructible state. However, most of the area had been entangled by vines, moss, and buildings that could not be named. Standing in front of the temple and looking at it for a while, Yin Nuoxing shook her head. The breath of life in the forest is too strong. The breath of life in this forest is comparable to a high-level life. It can automatically devour the residual breath of life and make it look like no one has ever been here. High-level life. C looked up and repeated. Suddenly, she pulled Yin Nuoxing's arm and said subconsciously, "Little star, will they get up and run away?" Yin Nuoxing. Theoretically, you can use the power of the rules to modify it. But now you can't. I'm just saying, you don't have to take it so seriously. The situation inside the temple was the same as the hut in the sentry tower. It was empty. The ground was full of dead branches and leaves that had been blown in. The ground was really covered with layers upon layers of leaves. It was unknown how many years it had been abandoned to accumulate such a large amount of leaves. The footsteps of the four were accompanied by the rustling of leaves. They walked into the temple on the left. There was no left or right side hall. It was just an empty hall. Not far from the door, there was a stone the size of a head that Siyu had just thrown in. Other than that, there was only a statue in the entire temple. It was a stone, 10-meter-long statue. There was a huge chair with complicated patterns on it. A figure was sitting on the chair, leaning against the armrest and crossing one leg over the other. Its left hand was on the armrest, and its right hand was clenched into a fist to support its cheek. Its right hand was raised to the side with the palm facing upwards as if it was holding something. Its face only had a nose, and other facial features could not be seen. Although it had long hair, Siyu Feng also had long hair that was longer than most girls. He himself also had medium short hair, so obviously this could not be used to determine the gender of the statue. Although there were no facial features, Yin Nuoxing could roughly imagine the expression of the owner of the statue when it was being carved. It should be expressionless, languid. If the right hand was holding a wine glass, it would be even more vivid. A statue, Yin Nuoxing murmured. Her eyes fell on the chair that the person was sitting on. It was a heavy high-backed chair that looked like a throne, and the patterns were very clear. The face of the statue was not carved, but the details of the chair were so clear. If the person did not have a grudge against the person who carved it, then there must be something special about the chair. Although it looked like a stone, it should be made of some special material. It had obviously been placed here for many years. Ordinary stone would have some degree of damage, but it was still intact. It even brushed away the dust on the statue, as if it was just carved not long ago. Hui pinched his chin and raised his head to think for a while. Suddenly, he jumped up and landed behind the platform where the statue was placed. He came to the back of the chair and looked at it for a while. He waved to Siyu Feng and the two girls and said, "Feng, come and see." They went around the back of the statue. There were some runes engraved on the back of the chair. Yin Nuoxing just glanced at it and knew the original divine language. An unfinished version. Hui added, "What is not written can't be finished. If it is written, something will happen. So it is just engraved some scattered words. It can't form the correct word order. Well, I don't understand it either. Jing Yun and Sui Feng are not here now. Send a message. They are in seclusion in the Sanctum of Origins. Let's memorize the words first. We will talk about it when the time comes." Yin Nuoxing nodded. She walked from the side to the front and looked at the statue. "Who do you think it is?" "Well, it must be from the previous era." "You're talking nonsense." Hui smiled and scratched his head. "Indeed, but that is not what I am paying attention to. There is the original divine language, which means that this void region left behind from the previous era." Yin Nuoxing narrowed her eyes slightly. It avoided the void, annihilation, and the tide of chaos. Hui nodded slightly and added, "It may even be formed on the spot. When it was formed, it dragged a considerable part of the world into this place. We can be sure." Yin Nuoxing's face twitched and turned green. This place really has something to do with the origin nonsense. However, even if it had nothing to do with the origin nonsense, it had something to do with the chaos concept body. The two were the same level, and once involved, there was no way to avoid it. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.